Hello guys, Modest Major here. Today we're going to be ranking all 96 Mario Kart 8 Switch Deluxe tracks from worst to best. Truth be told, being transparent with you, when Mario Kart 8 came out and it had the original map rotation, I thought it was one of the weaker map rotations, and it kind of put me off the game. You know, a lot of people would say Mario Kart 8 was one of their favorites, just because of like the graphics and the presentation and the production. I just didn't get it. I wasn't seeing it. I was like, you know, I think Mario Kart Mario Kart Wii easily trumps this, and I think arguably Mario Kart 7 trumped it as well. I just think that it could have been a lot more than what it was, and I wasn't all that excited by what they had to offer. Then obviously they had the original DLC, or the initial DLC offering on Mario Kart Wii U. And that, you know, buffed it up a little bit. You had tracks like Dragon Driftway that I thought added a bit more variety to it and were a little bit more interesting for my takes. But it wasn't until they got all 96 tracks added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe where I found like, okay, now I'm starting to see this ranked in the upper echelon of Mario Kart games. I think there's some really good maps in the rotation. And personally, I was quite excited to see, you know, the new remakes coming along. And now that they're all released and it's all one big package, I thought, hey, what better time to give my thoughts on which maps are the best and which maps are the worst. So without further ado, we'll get into the video. I'm not going to make you wait with too much filler. Let's go into it. 96. Okay, this is what I've put as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's worst track on the Nintendo Switch, Excitebike Arena. Now, some of you guys are probably going to think this is a little bit harsh. Excitebike is okay, you know, it's got its little jumps, it's got its variety. You know, they obviously have the gimmick with Excitebike Arena where each time you race through the map, if you didn't know, there's multiple different variations. I think it's like literally hundreds, which makes every time that you race through the track a little bit more varied. But I don't think this stops Excitebike Arena from feeling like an absolute slog. And if anything, the gimmick just seems like a way to try and conceal just how simplistic and repetitive and boring this map is. The shortcuts I just find like incredibly easy. You know, there's no reward for racing the track multiple times. You're going to see a lot of these shortcuts the first time you race it. You're going to think, oh, there's grass there, I can probably go through that. I just don't really particularly like the theming of it. You know, if you were going to go Excitebike, you could have had things that really exemplified like dirt bike racing, or a little more references to old school stuff. I think it just didn't really meet the mark. And when I think about maps in Mario Kart 8 that put me off the game when I first started, because again, I had a kind of cold reception to Mario Kart 8 when it first came out, especially in comparison to Mario Kart Wii. This was one of the maps that keep coming up, and I was like thinking, am I just going to play this race forever? To me, Baby Park trumps this map massively. I couldn't really say why. I just think the theming of Baby Park, I can keep going and going and going. It might be just that it's a desert map, and a lot of when I think about what makes a desert map good is whether or not the desert map has like really good visual variety, or it's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging, exciting shortcuts. Like Dry Ruins has some great shortcuts. So this has to be the lowest rank. Bit of a disappointment. It definitely gets my 96th spot. Coming in at 95 is Sweet Sweet Canyon. Now, I think for a lot of people, they're going to find this a bit of a surprise to see something like Sweet Sweet Canyon this low. I've actually heard some people say they really like Sweet Canyon. They really like the way it looks. But I have two words for you, really. Piss waterfalls. That's all I'm seeing everywhere on this map. Why is everything yellow? You know, why is the water yellow? Why do I go underground yellow? Why is the toning yellow? It looks like one of those sepia filters on a phone camera. You know, when I heard the name Sweet Sweet Canyon, I love, like, sweetie-themed or food-themed courses. You can do so much with it, and the variety and the visual fidelity can bring so much to life. But on this track, I'm just not feeling it. The course layout just doesn't feel that satisfying to race. Again, the shortcuts feel really simplistic and repetitive to take time in, time in. And this is one that I'm just constantly voting against. You know, they've got the long jump at the top, which I don't think really does much to sell me on the course's visuals. You know, again, it's just piss waterfalls wherever I look, as far as the eye can see. Sometimes, you know, maybe I've got a higher sensitivity to the color yellow than your average human being, because I'm just not seeing it with this one. I think it could have looked so good, and I think there's courses in this game that do a better job of, you know, bringing food to life or bringing, you know, a visual theme together. And overall, this is just 100% one of my lesser ranked tracks, and I will vote against it till the day I die. Even Excitebike Arena, you could say, is a little bit shorter, so at least you get it done and over and done with. This one feels like a bit of a slog, and it's just not all that entertaining, so that's why it makes my 95th rank. This one may not come as much of a surprise for you, but coming in at 94, we've got Bone Dry Dunes. This is a map that just from the offset didn't really wow me. I actually really like the idea for the theme. I think like the idea of seeing these skeletons of like Bowser and, you know, riding along the skeletons and the corpses of all these like giant creatures, these monolith creatures. I thought that was an awesome idea. But there's something they get wrong about the track layout, where there's just too many open areas, the turns just aren't the right amount of challenging, there isn't the right amount of shortcuts. And I remember, like, you know, the map feels like it's building to a crescendo at the beginning, and then it just kind of loses its footing, and the ending of the map just sort of trails off, and you're left just kind of wanting more. Something different, you know, they could have maybe added lava to this, they maybe could have explored the, you know, like, the theme and the vibe more with, like, different enemy variety. You know, you only really have the dry bones right at the end, and it feels like it doesn't really cap it off in a particularly interesting way. I do give it credit, you know, for the small little bone sections where you ride across. I think they do look cool. I just think that all feels like it's a road to something better or a more interesting part of the map, and then it sort of fizzles out. And the ending section is just such a letdown, really, when you get to it. I really do think the map is built to sort of highlight that last area as you go off the glider, and it's like, hey, final part of the map, you're going into the dry Bowser head, but at the same time, there's just something completely lacking from the experience of going into that final portion of the race. And I think they really missed the mark, which is a shame, because I do actually think Mario Kart in general across the series has been pretty good at desert maps. It doesn't have too many stinkers, and desert can be a bit of a tricky theme to get right. You know, it's fairly simplistic. There's sand everywhere. So, you know, it could be a little bit more troublesome on average, but Bone Dry Dunes is just an example of where they got it wrong. And I really wish they'd have had a, you know, more superior starting desert map than this one in the rotation. But alas, that's my 94th. Coming in next, we've got Cheeseland. This probably isn't too much of a surprise either. I feel like a lot of these tracks around that 96 to 92 range, they're just, or 90 range maybe, they're kind of in this malaise of like, you know, it's even hard to rank them above one another because they feel quite mediocre to me, and there's not too many standouts. I think this track kind of feels like a bit of a missed opportunity for me. Personally, I think they could have gone a bit more crazy with the cheese theme. They could have had things like melted cheese, maybe some pizza, maybe just go a little bit different with the cheese. But I feel like you get things like blocks of cheese, you just get, it kind of looks like a desert aesthetic, and then it's heavily built around the shortcuts at the end, which, don't get me wrong, if you get the cheesy side, pardon the pun, of the shortcut at the end of the map, it feels pretty nice to do. You can make some crazy comebacks, you can pull off some wins that definitely feel like they shouldn't happen. And I think for that reason, that's why it goes a little bit higher than the others, because I probably have had more fun in a twisted way with this map than a lot of other maps. But, you know, with that also comes a fair degree of heartbreaks when someone gets a shortcut on you, and you don't get the boost at the right time, or you don't get the power-up, or you get shocked at the wrong time. Overall, I just feel like the aesthetic isn't something that I want to keep coming back to. And the track layout, whilst I don't actually mind the first half, I think the first half is fairly enjoyable to race. Towards the end, it just feels a bit haphazard, and, you know, they just sort of squished in a bunch of shortcut at the end, all in one place. And it's not one I'm particularly, you know, I usually let out a grunt, let out a sigh when I see Cheeseland being voted. I'm like, who votes Cheeseland in 2024? We're in 2024! Give it a break! It's Cheeseland! You know, what more is there to be said? Yeah, not much to be said on Cheeseland, and that's why it is my 91st. 92nd on the list, we find ourselves at Tokyo Blur, first of our Mario Kart Tour tracks, I believe. And what more fitting word than blur to describe this? I mean, the track is a blur. When I try and recall what goes on this track or how the track layout performs, it feels so hazy to me, which is a shame because it's Tokyo, it's Japan. You know, the developers at Nintendo, they're going to be mostly, I'd say, in origin Japanese. And you would have thought they'd do something really cool and splash out for a track like Tokyo Blur, but it feels quite plain, in all honesty. And I think it would have been cooler. When I think of Tokyo, I think of, like, nighttime neon lights. I think they definitely should have gone with a different theming on this track. You know, Tokyo Tower is probably the main aesthetic standout. You got a couple of the Japanese-style buildings, but overall the track feels a little bit dull to me. It doesn't particularly have anything wrong with it, per se, and it's quite short. So, but unfortunately, I wouldn't say it's short but sweet. It's something I'm probably more likely to spit out. And, yeah, I mean, when this came out, I remember feeling pretty negatively towards tour tracks. I was like, okay, like, I understand why some people were a bit iffy about tour tracks coming to Mario Kart 8 when I saw this one. Luckily, later on, I think they really picked it up, and a lot of the tour tracks got better. And, of course, you have the different laps, which I think saves it from being, you know, a complete F-tier map. It's probably just in the tier of E, I would say, for me anyway. But it's very simplistic, and it's a little bit... Honestly, it feels like a race where your skill doesn't feel like it has too much of an effect or an impact, or as much of an impact as I would like on the map. And that is why it's my 92nd map. Next up is Mario Circuit off the Flower Cup at 91st. Unfortunately... This map, I'm actually a really big fan of Mario Circuits, like, in the past. I think a lot of my favorite tracks, or maybe not favorite tracks, but definitely, like, the upper echelon of tracks in Mario Kart history are Mario Kart tracks. I really like the Mario Circuit on GameCube. I really like the one on N64, the original. The Wii one wasn't my favorite, but I also don't think it was a particularly awful track. It just wasn't my favorite. This one, for me, ranks as one of the more disappointing ones, which is a shame. I think, although they have, like, a lot of anti-gravity, and, like, visually it looks like it shows off a good amount of that, it just doesn't really give that feeling of, like, inertia, or the feeling like you are going upside down. I don't know if that's to do with Mario Kart 8 mechanics, but to me, like, it never really felt like an exciting course, which is a shame because I think it looks like an exciting course. Like, when I first saw this in the preview material and stuff like that, when, you know, Mario Kart Wii had just come out, and then I moved to Mario Kart 8, I was like, oh my god, I'm going to love this track. Like, this is going to be so cool, but it didn't really capture my imagination too much when I was playing. You know, it's by all means not a terrible track, I don't think. It's just, there's nothing that really sets it apart from the competition, I feel like. I feel like the shortcuts are fairly limited, and it's kind of obvious where you're going to take the one shortcut right near the end. Couple of grass shortcuts here and there, but overall, it didn't really go out of its way to amaze me, and I think they could have done more to capitalize on the mechanics, on the anti-gravity, and on the sense of speed and flow in the map. And it's a little bit simplistic, a little bit easy mode, baby mode, which to me, like, the easier tracks are always going to rank a little bit lower for me, personally, because I like a little bit more challenge. It just adds more chaos into the mix and more fun into the mix, personally, when, you know, there's the potential of falling off the map, for example. So that's why it's my 91st. Nothing majorly against it, but it just doesn't, you know, knock my top off or anything like that. At number 90, rounding off the decade, we have Ice Outpost. I think I do have a little bit of a grudge against this map, for whatever reason. When I actually think about the layout of the track and the shortcuts, I do think a lot of them are quite fun to pull off, and it is quite a fun layout. But it might just be the green and yellow, or... And also, you know, to clear up things, like, I normally love ice maps as well, so I feel like I should like this map. But something about it just rubs me the wrong way. I can't say why. I think it's just like the idea, it's almost like an illusion, like there's a lot going on with the two separate tracks that kind of overlap and overgo, but it just doesn't seem to make much of a difference to my race, whichever one I choose at whatever time. I do think the shortcuts kind of save this from being a terrible map, and you know, I kind of like the little aesthetic parts where there's like little shy guys in the background, and, you know, it kind of feels like an alive area, which I like, but I still... it doesn't really do it for me, and I'm usually a bit frustrated when it comes up on the map cycle, because it just doesn't feel like there's that much to it. And like I said, this is one where I definitely just have a grudge against it. I see it and I'm like, ugh, Ice Outpost, why? Why this one? But, you know, nothing too personal, except sometimes it is personal. But that's my 90th, don't really have much more to say about it. Next up at 89, we have Donut Plains 3. This is a track which I feel like could be fixed fairly easily for my taste, what I'd like to see different from it. And most of it comes down to, for whatever reason, the aesthetic they went for looks like a muddy crap day in UK. Like, it just looks trash. It's got puddles. It just doesn't do it for me. It reminds me of a wet day in UK. You know, maybe I'm too used to it. Maybe some people in America or in Florida or something like that saw this and thought, wow, like, I don't get to see weather like this. This is incredible. I saw it and I thought, ugh, it just looks like a bad day. It looks like you need a coat. It looks like a sad day of weather. It's not one that I necessarily hate racing. I think it's kind of fun. I've definitely had some good races on it where I've been like, oh, that was really satisfying. It's a little bit short. I do like them a little bit longer, generally, and with a little bit more variety into what's going on from a map-to-map basis. But I don't actually think it's that offensive. I think the aesthetic is the main thing that's putting me off. I wish it was just a bit more colourful and bright, and you know, it kind of has this like overtone or this overcast look to it. And the puddles at the back, it just feels kind of miserable. You know, when you get in, you know, you've been out all day and it's wet and then you just need to dry like the rest of the day. It gives me that vibe where you're just glad you got back inside from the trash that is this course. That's just my perspective. You know, I could be wrong. But that's just how I feel, and that's why it's 89. Next up is GBA Mario Circuit. Uses the anti-gravity in a pretty interesting way. I quite like it. This is a map where it feels like they made the anti-gravity work for it a little bit better and more interesting to me than, or just feels more right to me than what I said about the other Mario Circuit, the Mario Kart 8 Mario Circuit. However, it is a map which just seems to end up in BS 24/7. The last portion of the map seems to be an absolute chaos fest. It's very short. I do overall, like, I've had some good races on it. That's what I'd say. You know, is it a peak course? Absolutely not. Is it particularly offensive? No. I'd just say it's kind of like run-of-the-mill. It's hard to have too much to think about it positively or negatively, to be honest, because it is so short. But definitely, like, if one thing was putting me off, it's the BS levels that happen near the end. Those last turns, like, they can be so make or break on what power-up you get. And it does, in general, feel like a track that completely favors you having a good power-up and completely negates you not. You know, like, the racing almost feels like it plays second fiddle to what power-up you happen to pick up towards the end. And definitely, before, like, the bagging nerfs came in, this was a track that would have benefited massively from the bagging strategies. And it still feels like you can kind of, like, accidentally bag on this track where you just, right place, right time, you got a star power, and although you raced terribly, you ended up finishing great. So yeah, not my favourite, but not absolutely offensive to me either, so that's why it's number 88. At number 87, we have Twisted Mansion. Now, this is a track I have some really mixed feelings on. I actually think this could have been like a peak Mario Kart 8 course. In terms of aesthetic, it pretty much nails like what I would like to race in a Haunted Mansion style track. I think there's like parts, you know, when you enter the mansion and a lot of the, you know, old sort of Victorian Haunted Mansion aesthetic to it looks so cool. Like, it looks, they nailed it so well. Then it goes into the underwater theme and I'm just sort of left scratching my head. I don't really know why they went to that theme, to be honest, and the way it sort of interconnects with itself doesn't really make sense. It almost looks like different maps were cobbled together in a way that didn't really reflect what I would imagine would happen in this sort of mansion from the entrance. Like, you know, they were just trying to be a bit different, or they were trying to show off their underwater gimmick, and it just ends up feeling a little bit messy. I'd also say that the simplicity of the track in terms of the way it's raced is a real drawback because it starts to feel like you're just constantly racing in a straight line and the turns just aren't challenging enough. And again, it starts to feel like a bit of a beginner course. Overall, it just definitely feels like missed potential, and I think that's probably why I rate it a bit lower in my head. Because I see the potential in it. I'm like, wow, like this could literally be one of my favorite Mario Kart courses if they changed a bunch of stuff. But, like, you know, if they changed the way it raced and they changed parts, you know, what I said about the underwater area, I just don't think it really fit, and I don't think they really pulled it off too successfully there. But nonetheless, like, the stuff it does well, it does great. And I really think it could have been one of the better Haunted Mansion-style tracks in Mario Kart history. So I hope they give it a go in future Mario Kart titles and try and pull off something similar again. But yeah, this is why it's my 87th track. At number 86, we've got Mushroom Cup's Water Park. To me, the issues with this one feel kind of obvious to me. I love water park aesthetics. I think water parks are one of the coolest things ever. I used to go to water parks a lot as a kid. I absolutely loved them. Couldn't get enough of them. Always had a bit of a fascination with like water-themed levels and designs and things like that. I think are amazing. I think one of the things they could have done in this, and should have done with this maybe, is had a bit more like internal piping sections. You know, maybe you go into water pipes, maybe it gets a bit darker, you play with light and dark. I've always thought that was one of the better aspects of like water-based levels, and maybe they didn't want to be too repetitive because that is kind of over-relied. You know, you do get a bit of that in Piranha Pipeway, and maybe a bit of that in like the Wario Circuit as well. It's kind of like these underground sections with water rapids coming through them. So I understand maybe why they tried to go with something different. But it feels like a very simplistic layout, and it doesn't really add much atmosphere to it. Something feels a little bit empty about this water park, like no one would ever go here. It feels a bit abandoned, it's not full of life. I think maybe they could have patched it up with some, like, NPCs. If you're going to go for this daytime, vibrant, you know, attitude, then I think maybe there should have been more Toads, more Shy Guys, you know, seeing all these, like, Mario creatures or Mario characters going onto rides, so it actually feels like a lived-in place. It feels a bit like a ghost town, this level, and again, I think it has the common issue of there's too many like straights on this turn, and the turns aren't challenging enough. I do think it's a shame because I love the water aesthetic, and it is carried pretty much by its water aesthetic. I think that's the best aspect of it by far. I just think they could have done more overall, so it's a little bit disappointing, to be honest. At number 85, we've got Bloody England. It's London Loop. Yeah, to me, London Loop, it just sort of misses the mark. It's got Big Ben in it, you know, that's nice, but it kind of has a similar vibe to Tokyo Blur, where it just doesn't really capitalise on the aspects of London that I think are possibly the most interesting. Sort of blends together all of the scenery. Now, I will be honest, there are some parts of London that are pretty boring anyway. You know, when you walk through London, not everything's bloody amazing in London. I'd say the same probably for any major city. You know, a lot of major cities, there are parts that are awesome, but there's probably parts that are boring as anything anyway. But London Loop, I just don't feel like it really tickled my fancy. I'll be honest, I'm not the most overly patriotic Brit in the world ever. I'm not like, oh my god, it's, you know, bloody the London Eye, my favourite place in the world, it's bloody Big Ben. I don't care. Like, it is, you know, it's mostly boring, to be honest with you. But, you know, it's cool to be repping, regardless. It's cool to be repped, I suppose. But I think it just has this tour, it's kind of exemplary of mediocre tour tracks in that it feels kind of forgettable. There's too many twists and turns that don't feel as identifiable and as memorable as a regular Mario Kart track. And it sort of blends in. I do like the difficulty on this track. That's probably why it's a little bit higher. I think there's a lot of nice shortcuts on this map, and there's a lot of fun turns to be made. I just think overall it doesn't really stand out as super distinct, and I don't think it does the best job of summing up everything about British culture and, like, you know, putting it on the map and being like, yeah, that's for sure Britain, that's for sure amazing. Yeah, it has a couple standout elements, but it just doesn't really feel that way to me all the time. It sort of loses its, you know, landmarks and its visual flair for me sometimes. I'm sort of like, I just feel like I could be racing anywhere in the world at certain parts. So yeah, not a bad track by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely couldn't put it any higher on this list. Next at number 84, we've got Sunset Wilds. Now, this has become a bit of a meme in the YouTube community for Mario Kart 8, and it's become a bit of a talking point because, of course, as you probably are aware, the sun does not, in fact, set in Sunset Wilds, and this was something it did on the GBA and something it did on the Mario Kart Tour version, which obviously I do think is incredibly cringe that they didn't program that in when it's kind of like the most distinct part of the course. Nonetheless, I couldn't bring myself to rank it like lower than 80s because I actually do quite enjoy the layout of it and racing it. I think the variety's good. I like the layout. To be honest, I'm actually a bit of a sucker. I think I try and deny to myself that I kind of like desert courses sometimes. But I do kind of like desert courses. You know, I always think, desert courses, I hate them. But when they do it right, I really like a desert course. Like, I used to love Calamari Desert back on the N64. You know, that was my first exposure to a desert course, and I absolutely loved it, and I loved the music they picked for it, and I loved, like, the sort of Wild West vibes. And I think they do a pretty good job here of bringing the aesthetic forward. Should they have put in the sunset? Absolutely. Could that have put this way higher on the list? Probably. You know, the Shy Guys with the little pickaxes are quite charming. It's a shame that, like, they obviously could put some effort into stuff. You know, I don't think it's a complete lazy rehash, so why did they overlook the sunsetting? I'm not really sure. And there's also so many bright maps on Mario Kart 8 as well that it would have made sense to have it, you know, have the sunset. I think it would have stood out as, you know, being the only map that has, like, a changing weather cycle. I think it could have been really cool. So, definitely a shame, definitely a missed opportunity, but is it my most hated, you know, disgraced track of all time? No, you know, it's fine. It's not too bad. So yeah. At number 83, we find Toad Harbor. Now, for some people, this is going to be pretty low, I would say, on the list of Mario Kart 8 tracks. But I have a lot of history with this track. This was actually the first Mario Kart 8 track I ever played. I played it at Eurogamer, which is like a European, well, UK expo where you get to try out games before they came out. And I played Mario Kart 8. And this was the first map I played, and I remember being so brutally disappointed compared to Mario Kart Wii from my first impression. It just didn't feel like Mario Kart Wii. It lost a lot of the speed, it lost a lot of the excitement, it lost a lot of the character for me, and this was kind of a track that really exemplified that. Again, it comes back to that problem. There's a lot of straight areas, there's a lot of simplistic racing, and it just didn't really do it for me. And for me, this one's another kind of hallmark of the pre-DLC maps, where it just kind of stood out to me as a map that didn't really grab my attention. I can't really say why. I think it's more so character in a lot of ways, where they've tried to, like, put the polish of the aesthetics and, you know, this, like, sort of premium, almost like a Pixar look to a lot of these new Mario Kart maps. I think they lose a bit of the soul in it. And it doesn't feel like there's this hustle and bustle and this realism to this, like, harbour. Whereas if you go back to something like Toad's Factory or something like Delfino Plaza, I don't remember what it was called, the Delfino map in Mario Kart Wii. For me, those felt like they had so much heart to it and so much character to it. And I just couldn't, you know, the music immediately brings me to that place, and it's so memorable and so distinct. And I don't really get that vibe with Toad Harbor. Like, you know, if someone said, oh, sing the Toad Harbor theme, I couldn't really remember it off the top of my head. Or if someone said, you know, what's your favourite shortcut on Toad Harbor? I don't think I'd have one. I don't think I'd care. I'd be like, well, the grass at the end's alright. But, you know, if you think about Toad's Factory on Mario Kart Wii, you can remember the best shortcuts of that. You can remember how the map feels. You can remember how the music plays. There's so much more to it, I feel like. So this map, it just doesn't really capture me. Now, is it okay to race? Yeah, absolutely. It's fine. It's like a standard map. But, again, it just doesn't really go into those upper echelon of Mario Kart maps. So it had to be a little bit low here, I feel. Number 82, we've got Mario Kart Stadium. Now, I think when this game first came out, I really wasn't a big fan of this map. Too simplistic, a little bit baby shortcuts. I think the thing that stuck with me over time is the presentation. I absolutely love the presentation of this map. It's one of my favorite looking maps, period. Is it a bit simplistic? Yes. It is a beginner course. For some reason, the beginner courses in Mario Kart 8, just again, down to the mechanics of the game, they don't really capture the same excitement that a course like Luigi's Raceway in Mario Kart Wii can. Because I just think Mario Kart Wii just feels so fast and frenetic that it gets a little bit mental. Whereas it's not really the same in this. It gets mental for a short burst of time when people are taking the shortcuts at the end, but not so much overall. Like, the minute-to-minute chaos doesn't feel the same or as tangible. Nonetheless, presentation-wise, absolutely love it. It hits it out the park. The fireworks, the anti-gravity section. One of the reasons I can just keep coming back to it and not really get too annoyed with it is just because of how it looks. It's like, well, yeah, it's not my favorite layout in the game, but every time I race it, I'm going to be thinking, God, this looks amazing. This looks sweet. And I think it just showed, you know, it sort of brought together the vision that they were going for with Mario Kart 8, where they just wanted a bigger, better Mario Kart in presentation. And I think, you know, they really upped their production values for a course like this, and I think it shows. And it was a really good way to introduce people to Mario Kart 8. I think if this was one of your first tracks to play, for sure. So yeah, definitely a good track. Next up at 81, we've got Wario Stadium. Now, the Wario courses in Mario Kart history, I feel like they've had a bit of a trouble creating a course that's like S tier. I always think they achieve a minimum bar where they're not like awful, but like they've never really gone out their way to impress me in the same way something like Waluigi Coliseum did, or whatever that course is called, Waluigi from the Wii and from the GameCube. I think that course was absolutely amazing. I don't think this one reaches the heights of the Waluigi course in Wii. But nonetheless, the racing on this one I do like. Aesthetically, it just doesn't do it for me. I don't really like the way the desert looks or feels on this. And visually, it just starts to look a bit repetitive to me. And it's another one where the crescendo at the end of the underwater section doesn't really do it for me. Like, it doesn't feel like there's much rhyme or reason to why things are where they are in the race. Nonetheless, I do think it is relatively fun to race. There's relative difficulty to it. It's quite easy to mess up the turns on the metal wireframes at the end, especially if you do 200cc. It gets absolutely bananas at that section. But overall, you know, good course. I would personally change the aesthetic of it and personally change the layout of it a little bit for it to be a little bit higher, because I usually find myself voting against this one more often than I'd want to. And, you know, it just doesn't really stand out to me as a top-tier Mario Kart track in any way. And I think that's a shame because, again, Wario Coliseum on GameCube didn't really do it for me. Wario Stadium on N64 was a bit too long and a bit drawn out. So they just haven't really nailed the Wario courses. Wario Mountain, I think, is probably one of the better ones. But, again, is it S-tier? I don't know. I mean, you'll see where it's ranked later on. But, yeah, this one just doesn't really blow my socks off. Next up at 80, rounding off another decade, we've got Paris Promenade, or Promenade, I don't know how you pronounce it, I don't know if that's Americanism versus a Britishism, but here we are. There's a lot to like about Paris Promenade, I think. I think the aesthetic, they pretty much nail it. I think the music, they pretty much nail. The course layout, it doesn't really do it for me. It feels a little bit simplistic and repetitive, but you know, it's not awful to race. Again, it's just too many straights. I'm a hater of maps where it's like there's just like straight sections. I mean, the straight section going under the Eiffel Tower, I feel like is particularly egregious. And then whenever you make one turn, you're into another straight, and you're into another straight, and it just feels a bit like it definitely suffers from the fact that it was ported from Mario Kart Tour. I think, and the layout just doesn't really go crazy in terms of testing your driving abilities in any meaningful way. I do think aesthetically, you know, it's kind of a missed opportunity, because I think if you'd have put an amazing feeling course with this aesthetic, it could have been great. I really do think that, and I do think the music's memorable, and I think the vibes are memorable. I just think that it's massively let down by the way that the course actually races. And it starts to feel like a bit of a slog to keep coming back to this. It would be the sort of course where if it came up on rotation like 4 times in a row, 4 times in one day in a Mario Kart 8 session, you'd be sick of it by the 4th time. You'd be like, oh, I can take 1 of these, I can take maybe 2 of these, but you start putting 3 or 4 on me, I'm going to want to start putting Mario Kart 8 down. And it is a course that is voted quite a lot. So you actually do end up getting it quite a few times, I find. So for that reason, it's just a little bit disappointing, and that's why it's at number 80. At 79, we've got Toad Circuit 3DS. For a lot of people, it's probably a bit of a surprise that this is as high as it is. I don't know why, I just don't hate it, alright? I don't have a great reason. You know, it's just sort of... It's usually quite fun to race. I don't know why. I find the shortcut kind of fun. I find the glider kind of fun. Is it the best track ever? No. Does it look pretty hideous? Yeah. I mean, this was when the DLCs first started coming out on the Booster Course Pass. And everyone kind of thought, oh god, like, they're going to be doing a lazy botch job of this in terms of the aesthetics. But just in terms of actual racing, I do find it kind of fun. You know, it's not a particularly standout map, but I just don't think it does anything wrong either. It doesn't do anything horribly wrong, and it is kind of fun to race in a sense. I just can't see myself putting it any lower or any higher. It's just kind of like that sort of like mid-tier course. I think it's probably carried by the fact that it's not that experimental, and it's not that, you know, it doesn't try too much, so it can't get too much wrong. You know, its biggest crime is being a bit boring. But it definitely doesn't do anything wrong in my books, and I kind of enjoy it. So, you know, in terms of as a lower tier map, I kind of enjoy it. You know, I'm not saying I think it's amazing. It's just an okay lower tier map. There we go. At number 78, this course, Rainbow Road N64. It's a very big very mixed bag of emotions here, because N64 Rainbow Road is such a classic to me. Aesthetically, did N64 Rainbow Road do everything right? No, but at the time, the atmosphere, the aesthetic, and the music, there's so much that it provided, which was one of my favorite courses back in the day, and it was so memorable and so nostalgic. So when I've heard that they were bringing this back, you know, in this HD, and I saw the previews of it for the first time, I thought, oh my god, it looks absolutely amazing, and it does. Like, to me, this is one of the best looking Mario Kart courses, period. I think it looks great, top to bottom. However, it's lacking so much difficulty, it's lacking so much spice in the way that it races, that it just starts to feel a bit empty and hollow, which is such a shame, because to me it's such a waste of such an amazing looking track. Like, it looks fucking awesome, and I'm such a Rainbow Road fan. You know, I'm a diehard Rainbow Road fanboy, what can I say? And this course, just for me, screams missed potential. The music is incredible, the aesthetic is incredible, but the racing is just really forgettable. And at the end of the day, it's a Mario Kart game. I want the racing to be fun, so that's why I've got to rank it pretty darn low. And, you know, to be one above Toad Circuit does seem like a bit of a mean, but, you know, if I was thinking about what one actually raced better, Toad Circuit might even race better for my taste. There's just nothing to this one for me. Number 77, we've got New York Minute. I don't actually overall have too much wrong with this. Like, if I was going to point out flaws, there's some stuff I like about it. I like the color palette. I like some of the way the race track works. And I like some of the shortcuts and some of the aspects of the map in general. However, if you told me to, like, draw out a map of how New York Minute played and looked, I just can't remember it. Like, every time I race it, it's like I'm racing it for the first time. And I've raced it a lot of times. But it just feels really indistinct, and I don't think it does a good job. There seems to be a reoccurring problem with tour tracks in general, is that they just don't have a good job of having, like, these landmark, significant points that, like, draw you in and magnetize you and make you think, oh yeah, like, this part's coming up next on the track, and then it's going to go into this, and the flow is just a little bit wrong, which doesn't really make sense to me, because, you know, it might be something to do with, like, the gameplay mechanics of Tour and the way that Tour works, or the way that they tried to build Tour, but, you know, it should be that they had really distinct stuff to put in the map, because they're taking geographical locations, so they could have been like, right, we'll have a route that goes to Big Ben on London, and a route that goes to, you know, Manhattan buildings, or the Empire State Building, or whatever. But it just doesn't seem to work like that, and it just feels a little bit forgettable, and I think that's a shame, because I do think there is potential in this map, yet again, and I do like the way it looks a fair bit. It reminds me of New Donk City a little bit. And I think you could have combined elements of New Donk City with elements of New York City. And it could have been a bit of a treat. But ends up feeling a little bit hollow to me. And definitely isn't a map that I would put, you know, anywhere near a top 10, for example, of Mario Kart tracks. So yeah, it's got to stay at number 77. Coming in at number 77, we've got Piranha Plant Pipeway. I think we cross over a little bit of a threshold here, maybe into like D tier, where the maps get a little bit better. I do think Piranha Plant Pipeway has a lot going for it. I think that the starts really strong. I love the way you go into the pipes at the beginning, and it sort of has that Mario Brothers 1-2 feel, where you go under the pipes for the first time, and the lighting changes. I really like that aspect of it, but I do think it starts to lose steam as you go through the level a little bit more. It starts to lose that like overarching narrative of the map. I like when a Mario Kart map feels like it has a narrative and feels like everything's connected, and I feel like it loses that focus on the pipeways and the piranhas towards the end, and it just kind of fizzles out a little bit. But it's by no means a bad course. It's got enough challenge for me to keep engaged in it, I'd say. And you know, it's relatively enjoyable the whole way throughout. I would just say that, you know, it kind of it's definitely missing the aspects that like launches it into the stratosphere. I feel like where it has like a really interesting layout design or a really interesting aesthetic. It's kind of like it feels like it's average across the board. You know, like there's definitely nothing you could come out and be like, oh, it's terrible for this reason. I don't think it is, but it's just like solidly decent across the board for my taste, and that's why I just couldn't really rank it any higher. But nonetheless, you know, not a bad track. I think I might have liked the way it looked and felt on the 3DS, to be honest. I remember having really good memories with this game, so maybe just the fact that I played it on 3DS originally and it kind of lost a bit of that luster, you know, of the first time you saw it, because it definitely felt more memorable on its 3DS iteration of the game, and maybe they could have done more to like put a spin on it or put a remix on it. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I feel like 77 is pretty safe to put this map at. At number 76, we got Mumu Meadows. I go a little bit back and forth with this map. It's not, to me, as good as Mumu Meadows from the Wii, or probably even Mumu Meadows from the N64, just in the way that it feels and it races. It's obviously got a lovely aesthetic that is super, you know, captivating to look at and brings the farmyard life to life. And I think they do a really good job of making it feel alive as well, with the way the animals intersect with the stage. And the cows just look so, you know, like something out of a DreamWorks movie or something like that. They just look great. But it's just the overall feel, I guess. I feel like it could be a little bit longer. I feel like it could be a little bit more challenging. And it starts to feel a little bit like a throwaway course in some ways. It's definitely not a bad course, though, and I wouldn't be, like, salty when it comes up on the map selection. You know, you're guaranteed a base level of good time. I think it just doesn't go above and beyond, and I don't think it quite measures up to the Mario Kart Wii Mumu Meadows. I don't think it's horrendous compared to it either, and it does some stuff better than Mario Kart Wii Mumu Meadows does, but it's just not super my favourite course. So, yeah, stays here. Next up is Toad's Turnpike, which is sort of a remix of the Toad's Turnpike on the N64. I was actually a really big fan of Toad's Turnpike on the N64. It had such a super unique feeling to it, and it really, you know, is baked in nostalgia in the way that it races, and its difficulty was just absolutely absurd, which is why Toad's Turnpike feels like a little bit of a step backwards for me, that it's kind of lost that identity and it's lost a bit of that difficulty. Nonetheless, I don't think it's the worst track with, like, the worst Mario Kart track with, like, cars on it. The cars are pretty fun to go on the back of the gliders, on the glider ramps with them. I love the little surfboard that you can go over and trick off of. And I love looking at the little designs, the unique designs of the Mario Kart, the Mario Kart themed and aesthetic vehicles that are going on the map. Again, it's not a bad looking map. I think it's carried a lot by the way it looks, but it is a lot of straight sections again. And you guys know how I feel about straight sections. They just don't do it for me. I want a little bit more turning, a little bit more helter-skelter. But it does feel like the appropriate length for a Mario Kart course, and the appropriate vibe for like a sort of nighttime city cruising course. I do wish that the cars were a bit more mental. Just because that's fun. Like, to be honest, like, Nintendo sometimes lose sight of the fact that, like, getting frustrated is part of fun. Like, people getting frustrated is fun. You know, that adds to the fun. That adds to the stakes. You can't have, like... You minimize the amount of fun you can have if you minimize the amount of frustration that can be had in this sort of a game. Like, you kind of need those elements of frustration because it makes the payoff when you overcome those frustrations so much better. Whereas, it feels a bit lower stakes when the cars aren't really causing you too much trouble in any way. You know, you don't even drive against traffic. So, for that reason, it couldn't be much higher than this. But, again, I don't hate it. It's just, yeah, couldn't get much higher. At number 74, we've got Boo Lake. I feel a bit bad putting this one where it is. I just can't see it going higher at the same time. I really like the aesthetic of it. I think it's one of the better courses. You know, I was saying earlier, sometimes they force in the gimmick of going underwater. But it just works in this map, and they do a really good job of, putting in the underwater sections. Nonetheless, I think it needs something a little bit different to the flooring that you're driving on. I think it starts to look a little bit repetitive with all the boarding. I'm really used to that across so many, like, different, Boo maps where there's just, like, boardwalk. It would be cool if you, like, raced on the back of, like, like, derelict boats underwater or something like that. Or, I just think they could go a little bit more crazy with the way that the actual course itself looked. And it can feel a little bit simplistic. I like the shortcut a lot. I really like the off-road shortcut, and it kind of feels like you need to prepare for when that turn is coming up, and really time, if you've got your power-ups at the right time, and not do it too preemptively, or not do it too late. It's very easy to crash into the wall, as you can see in the video, during that shortcut. So I think the shortcut carries a lot of the difficulty in this map to make it a little bit more spicy, but... overall, a good map. It does a good job of using the Boo aesthetic. I like the background a lot. Just doesn't quite knock my socks off. But that doesn't mean it's like a terrible map by any stretch of the imagination. Just maybe could have done with a bit more visual flair and variety for my tastes. But good map. At 73, we have Sky Garden. For me, I could just never hate this map because I quite like cloudy maps. I really like the way the map looks. I've definitely heard people say that they wish they did more with GBA Sky Garden, and I think that's fair. Like, I don't feel like it feels like a map that they put a tremendous amount of effort bringing it to life and going crazy with the details. But I really like the layout. I really like the leaf shortcuts. I really just like the way it feels to race. It's just one of these maps that just feels comfy to get on. And the shortcut at the end feels really nice to pull off and to get the right power up at the right time. It just does a good job of not feeling too cheesy. It's a little bit difficult to take it as sharp as possible and as clean as possible. Just overall, I really like the map. It's one that I'm never disappointed if it comes up on the rotation. I'm never like, oh god, I've got to sit through Sky Garden. I usually quite like it, to be honest. And I definitely think it was a good choice to bring back. And in general, with the GBA maps, it definitely came to the forefront of my mind that I kind of slept on the GBA maps in a lot of ways, and I actually went back to GBA Mario Kart to try it again, because I used to really not like it, and I think the main reason was the controls. I just don't like playing racing games on a handheld particularly, and when I played it on the Switch using an actual Pro controller, I realized, dude, I actually, really enjoy this game in a lot of ways, and a lot of the maps are, some of my favorites. They're really, exemplified the best aspects of Mario Kart when it's, simplistic, but it's so smart in its simplicity, it's not, doesn't feel underbaked. It just feels like just the right amount of, spice. So, yeah, I really like Sky Garden. I've got a lot of good to say about it. Coming in at 72, we've got SNES Mario Circuit 3. Now, again, might be a bit of a surprise that it's this high up. It's a very simplistic course, very basic in its visual elements. I think this is kind of a nostalgia pill to pick. I just like racing it, I've got to be honest. I like the way the turns work. I like the way the music is. And I just generally usually end up having a fun time with this course. I feel like with Mario Kart games, when you have your, like, quote-unquote, like, noob courses, I call them, where they're just a little bit more beginner-friendly, a little bit easier, you just randomly have your favorites and your least favorites. And this is one of my favorite, like, noob courses. It just comes up and I'm like, I'm going to have a fun time with this course. I just know I am. I like getting the shortcut at the end. I like the sort of build-up during the map and hoping that you get the boost for the shortcut at the end. I think they could have remixed the way that the map looked for sure. And it would have definitely, like, kept it more fresh, because obviously, you know, it does end up feeling pretty similar to the way it raced on Mario Kart Wii in a lot of ways. But nonetheless, I never really have too bad a time with it, and I kind of embrace the chaos of this map. I think you've got that really sharp hairpin turn as well that sort of exemplifies the difficulty of this map, and sort of, you know, brings a bit of challenge to it. And it just goes bananas. When stuff goes wrong on this map, it goes real wrong. And the power-ups just go absolutely chaotic on it. But I think the places where they put sand on this map is also quite intelligent. You know, there's a lot of opportunities for good shortcuts and good boost play on this map. And I just generally end up having a fun time on it for the most part. You know, I might get sick of it. I'm bound to get sick of it eventually, I'm sure. If it came up, like, again, if it came up like 9 times in a day, I'd probably get sick of it because it is quite simplistic. But generally, I enjoy it. Coming in at 71, we've got Dry Desert off the Banana Cup. This, for me, it doesn't really compare to Dry Ruins from the Wii. It just doesn't match up. I really like the interior section in Dry Ruins for the Wii, and I like the difficulty spikes in that map an awful lot. Nonetheless, I do really like the aesthetic of it, and I like the little whirlpool in the middle. It adds a little bit of chaos, adds a bit of spice, and the water shortcuts at the end, or the water trick spots, I should say, are pretty good. And again, it's a map that I think uses the underwater section to good effect. It doesn't over-egg the pudding. I think generally that's what you want from a water section, it not to take up the whole map or just feel like it was inserted for the sake of it. I think it actually kind of works, and it works with the tricking sections. And generally it's a pretty fun map. You know, it's probably let down a bit by the fact that it gets a bit too straighty in some points, and there's not enough challenging twists and turns in it. But, you know, I think that could have really elevated it to the next level. However, I definitely prefer this to the other tracks that have, like, desert-based themes in the game, like Cheeseland. You know, for me, this completely annihilates Cheeseland for enthusiasm and enjoyment. Again, a little bit cloudy and overcast. I'd probably change that about it. I just don't really see the point. You know, if you're in a scorching desert, it doesn't really make sense for it to, you know, the sun does come in, sure, but the clouds don't really fit the aesthetic of it, and they were probably just trying to be a little bit different with it. But there's some areas where you don't need to be different. I think this would have looked better with, like, yellow skies and just, like, a blazing hot sun. And yeah, it sort of looks like it's going to rain at any point on this map, which doesn't really make sense for a desert course. But, you know, I enjoy it. Do I love it? No. Do I hate it? No. It's just somewhere in the middle. Rounding off the decade at number 70, we've got SNES Rainbow Road. This course, it comes up an awful lot. It gets voted an awful lot. Probably for good reason. You know, it's short, it's sweet, it's fun. It's got a lot of fun little shortcuts, a lot of fun little moments that seem to crop up, and I quite like the way it looks a lot. I really like the moonlit aesthetic of it. I really like the rainbow bricks. You know, it's good, and it does a good job of being faithful to the original while still also giving it its own sort of unique identity. It is one that I think does get a little bit overvoted and can be a little bit repetitive from time to time. But it's still a great little map, and I think it's probably one of the better SNES, you know, run-backs out there. You know, without having to change too much about it. Because, I mean, to be honest, like, SNES Rainbow Road was probably the best course on the SNES version of Super Mario Kart. So, it kind of makes sense that this was a good one to bring back. Is it going to blow you away? No. Is it my favorite Rainbow Road? No. But I think for something retro, it has a pretty good feel to it, and they made the most of it. So yeah, I quite like it. So it gets to number 70. At number 69, we've got Calamari Desert from the N64. Now, a lot of why this got as high as it is probably going to be down to nostalgia. I absolutely loved this course as a kid on N64, and I remember I played with my brothers, and they didn't used to feel too strongly about it. I don't know why, it just really resonated with me. I love the Wild Wild West aesthetic. I love the soundtrack to it. The soundtrack is a huge piece of why it's so good. And I actually like the fact that they came back and they, mixed it up a little bit with the different, the alternating lap routes. And you actually race alongside the train. And it kind of took, I remember back on the N64 version, you always wanted to know if you could go, follow the tracks on the course and then go all the way into the tunnel. And it was a little bit jank in that area of the map. And you used to try and glitch into it and glitch out of it, etc. So I thought it was pretty cool that they mixed it up and you could actually do that on the final lap of this one. I can't rate it much higher than this because, again, it does have that issue of there's a lot of straight sections. There is a lot of straights, and it becomes a bit of a power-up fest with not too much racing. Also, the end of this map is an absolute chaos fest where it's just, trying to take desert shortcuts and off-road shortcuts as much as you can and as best as you can. But I do enjoy it. I rarely have an awful time with this map, and generally I do quite enjoy it, so it does come in at 69. Next up, we have Shy Guy Falls. This might be a bit lower than some people expect. I know some people absolutely love the aesthetic of Shy Guy Falls, but it took me a really long time to start enjoying this map. I just didn't like the way it felt race-wise. It felt really simplistic. There are a lot of straight sections on it, and I think there's a lot of maps on Mario Kart that have the sort of dirt track aesthetic, and it can get a little bit old for me. I wish it kind of changed the terrain more often. Definitely racing on the waterfalls is the best aspect of it, for sure. But by the fact that they're straights with just simple boost panels, it can feel a little bit monotonous. However, it's definitely grown on me a bit more. I think when the game came out, I probably would have rated it lower. It's definitely grown on me over time. I do like taking the shortcuts at the end of the map. And sort of when you get a sense of the scale of the map, it definitely, and sort of looking from the waterfall section and seeing the waterfall section at the beginning, I think when you sort of take in and you appreciate what they've done visually with the map, I do think it is impressive and enjoyable. It's just not my favorite map out there. I think if you'd have put this map with the speed of Mario Kart Wii, or even on 200cc, I think it races a lot more enjoyably. Personally, for my standards, I think it can feel a little bit long and drawn out on 150cc. I don't think the length really benefits it overly, but that's just my take. You can call me a hater in the comments. I wouldn't cry. I mean, I might cry internally a little bit, but yeah, that's just it for me, really. At number 67, we've got Dolphin Shaws. Dolphin Shaws feels like a bit of a missed opportunity for me, and I don't necessarily know exactly why that is. Maybe more like interesting jumping sections or platforming sections or whatever it might be, but something doesn't quite hit that high note for me, which is a shame because I love dolphins and I love the sort of underwater aesthetic and I love the coral areas that it's going for, and portions of this map are great and terrific. The soundtrack is great. I find myself getting a little bit bored by the portion of the map where you go on top of the moray eel and you sort of trick on the back of it. Something feels a little bit jank about it for me. I never quite hit the high notes. But overall, it's like a good map. It just doesn't wow me. And definitely it gets kind of overvoted, I think, just because it's a really pleasant looking map. And the soundtrack's nice, but I just think racing-wise, it doesn't really go above and beyond. And maybe they should have had more dolphins going on and played more into the theme, or you know, maybe if you had like schools of fish that you rode across the back of, and there was more than just the moray eel. I'm not really sure what you would do with it. I'm not gonna claim to be an expert, but there is definitely just, it feels like there's a missing piece of it, in spite of its many, many good elements, such as the soundtrack, and the, you know, awesome visuals, at portions of this map. But, yeah, it couldn't get much higher for me, and I think I've got to leave it here. At number 66, we've got Wild Woods. Now, in terms of aesthetic and visuals, this has got to be a pretty cream of the crop map. I think it looks absolutely amazing. And it sort of almost pushed me into ranking it a bit higher for that reason alone, because I love everything they went for. Like, in terms of, you know, when you can imagine looking at the concept art for this map and just being like, wow, like, it probably almost inspired them to, like, make a video game out of the location that they've made. I think it looks awesome, and the music fits it, and the theme fits it, and you kind of feel like you're a tiny little ant, you know, just going through this, like, gigantic course, through the treetops and through the woods. And I really like the progression of this map as well. I really like the way it goes into the River Rapids section. Then it's got that shortcut at the end. I think it caps it off quite nicely. There is something lacking for me in difficulty. I'm a difficulty whore, and I just don't feel like this map super capitalizes. I feel like it achieves the vision more that it was going for in 200cc for sure. It definitely feels like a 200cc course, especially the River Rapids section. Like, zooming across that in 200cc feels like an amazing experience. But overall, do think it's a little bit capped off by its difficulty, but nonetheless a great course, and I'm never disappointed when it comes up on the map rotation. Really like the leaf booster pads as well, one of the better booster pad sections in the game, and very fun to trick off of. But nonetheless, can't put it too much higher, but it's a good course. At number 65, we have GameCube Sherbet Land. I really enjoyed this on the GameCube, and I think I actually even prefer the Mario Kart 8 version of it. I love what they did with the underwater sections, where you fall into the little ice holes, into the little crevices, and then, you know, you're actually in these underwater sections. I'm a sucker for a winter map. I love winter aesthetic. I love, like, cozy winter gaming. I feel like gaming and winter just go hand in hand together, because, you know, there's so many people in the world who have such a terrible time in winter, and it's, like, you know, commonly associated with getting sick and commonly associated. But, you know, when you think of it from a gamer's perspective, you know, you're in a warm little cozy, you know, main room with a fireplace on maybe, and you're just having the time of your life, and you know, it works well. But I do enjoy the way the map races. It has a nice little spike of difficulty, but nothing too extreme. And I really love the music on this course. I think I don't always give it enough credit. It's one of these maps that I'll see on the voting screen and be like, I don't like it that much. And then I play it, or I see it in action, and I'm like, actually, it is pretty great. It's pretty fun. And it doesn't really have too many downsides to it that come to my head. You know, again, probably if I was going to increase it, it would be increasing difficulty a little bit. But nonetheless, I don't think this course was trying to be difficult, and I think it does a good job of doing what it says on the tin and just being a fun little winter map. So yeah, I'd give it a 65. At number 64, we have Berlin Byways, another Mario Kart Tour track. The issues with this track probably center around what I've mentioned previously in the video, which is the memorable factor of it. I do think it loses a bit of distinguishable gameplay. Most of the parts I remember are the sections with the pillars. I love driving under the pillars, but for me, the thing that really makes it an enjoyable race is the difficulty, the shortcuts. And it is a map that just gets better with more consecutive plays of it. I've definitely enjoyed it the more as it's come across. I remember not really thinking much of it at all, but now if it comes up on the map selection screen, I'm usually kind of happy to give it another go and to learn more about, you know, how the track plays, and to sort of master the shortcuts and the different laps of this map. I think the music's pretty standout as well. And I think they just did a pretty good job of making Germany feel like a really pleasant area to go. You know, they kind of took a direction with it, which I might not have expected. And I think it does a good job of, you know, bringing Berlin to life, really, because, yeah, they could have gone with the stereotypical stuff. You know, you kind of think of, like, beer festivals or you know, Bratwurst and stuff like that, but I think it went for a more cultural take on it, and a more, like, inner city vibe, and I really quite like it. It's not my favorite track, and I do think other tour tracks, do better, but I think the way that it races as a course is actually pretty strong. And, you know, it lends itself well to fun racing, which, you know, some of the other tour tracks, I don't think did do the best job of that, whereas I think this one did. So, yeah, I'd have to give it this higher rank for that reason. At number 63, we've got Baby Park from the GameCube. Now, this is one that might be a bit controversial. I think it's a little bit love-hate. I think some people absolutely despise Baby Park, and they just can't be dealing with the BS that happens on it. But for my taste, personally, I actually really enjoy this map. It's a guilty pleasure for sure, and I love what they did visually with the backgrounds here. This is one of these maps that there's just the more you look at the background, the more it brings it to life. And, you know, when comparing it to a map like Water Park, this is kind of what I mean when I mean, you know, say, bringing it to life. It feels so lively in the background for this map, and I think Water Park missed a ticket on that one. And I think it sort of goes with the vibe of Amusement Park as well, that it's really short and it's really chaotic. You know, when you come off of a roller coaster ride, a lot of the time you're sort of left there feeling like, whoa, what even just happened? And I kind of feel like that when I come off Baby Park, and part of it's going to be nostalgia, part of it's a classic, I've always raced it, but I just feel like even if you have a terrible time, it's such a short experience that I'm not usually left with a stinging taste in my mouth. I'm like, yeah, it's fine, it's Baby Park, it is what it is, does what it says on the tin, it's absolutely chaotic, and, you know, you can take a lot of grass shortcuts around the sides and have a lot of fun with it, and you can really, you know, manipulate the power-ups on this level, so I do quite enjoy it. It's a guilty pleasure. Coming in at number 62, we've got Thwomp Ruins. This was one of the more standout maps of the original map rotation, I feel. This is one that definitely, you know, sort of carried the original Mario Kart 8 maps on its back, I feel like, because it has a great amount of difficulty without being too difficult, and a great amount of simplicity without being too simple. The music's great, the theme is great, and it's pretty unique feeling. Almost feels like a Donkey Kong inspired map. But, you know, using the thwomps to such good effect and having that overall theming. And it's got one of my favorite shortcuts in Mario Kart 8. One of its, like, my favorite unique shortcuts. It feels really satisfying to nail a ramp shortcut on this level. And, you know, just saving a boost for the right time. In general, I do like it a lot. I'd probably have it be more difficult if it was up to me, but I think it was sort of a middle of the pack track in terms of difficulty. But very enjoyable. Whatchamacallit, the music just sounds great, and it definitely has that sort of like peak 3D Mario game sort of vibe to it, where you could imagine this being on Mario Odyssey and it wouldn't look out of place. And, you know, it just has that sort of production value that you come to expect from Nintendo, of just selling an aesthetic and selling a world in a really strong way. So, yeah, definitely really fond of number 62, Thwomp Ruins. Coming in at number 61, we've got Rainbow Road for Mario Kart 8. For me, this is a map that I wish they didn't call Rainbow Road. I really like it. As a track in a lot of ways, to be honest, but it just doesn't give me the feeling of being a Rainbow Road course, if that makes sense. It just, something feels a little bit, you know, going against the archetype of Rainbow Road, and I think that's probably what they were going for. They wanted to, you know, sort of reinvent how Rainbow Road felt for this game. It's got a lot of interesting shortcuts. You know, this is one of the maps where you first start seeing some of the big shortcuts coming from Mario Kart 8. Especially on 200cc, you can kind of go ridiculous on it. And it's got those booster panels that kind of resemble Toad's Factory booster panels. Visually, it's got a lot of cool aspects to it. But it feels a little bit industrial. You know, I like my Rainbow Roads feeling as cosmic as possible. I think cosmic is probably the word I would use, where it feels like it's like sort of transcending time and space. Whereas this feels like it's almost like a human-built facility on a rainbow, you know, in a star, which, you know, it's kind of like a satellite orbiting Earth. And I just don't think it really works for me as a Rainbow Road. However, as a track, it's fun, and again, I think this was one of the original starting Mario Kart 8 tracks, which was pretty darn decent and pretty darn solid. I wouldn't rank it amongst the upper echelon of Rainbow Road tracks, you know, solidly like middle of the pack, I would say, but, or lower middle of the pack, but it's a good race, and I've got nothing, you know, majorly wrong with it. Just doesn't knock my socks off. Coming in at number 60, rounding off another decade, we've got Choco Mountain N64. Originally, I wasn't too fond of this, but it has grown on me a little bit. I really like the little interior cave section on this map. I love the little crystals that appear, and you sort of got the Shy Guy miners hanging about, but and the bats coming out. It's overall a good map. I love the soundtrack to this map as well. It's really enjoyable. And it's just like a fun, goofy course. Doesn't feel like it takes itself too seriously. And it's sort of a really nice, refreshing nod to Choco Mountain on the N64. If I had one complaint, it would be visually, I just wish they went a bit more chocolatey with it. It's kind of like how Cheeseland, they didn't go too cheesy with it. I kind of wish Choco Mountain went a bit more chocolate with it. You know, like, I love chocolate. So having, like, cool, like, little references to chocolate bars, and cookies, and just got a little bit crazy with it. I think that would have been more enjoyable. And the crystals, whilst I do think they do look cool, you know, I probably would have preferred if when you got into it, you know, they were sort of mining for chocolate, let's say, and they had, like, chocolate rivers, and people were, like, scooping up chocolate from the chocolate, like, from rivers underground and stuff like that. I think that would have been a really cool direction to take it in, because unfortunately, like, it does start to look like dirt, with all the, like, sort of brown, muddy textures, which is a shame, because, you know, you want chocolate to look delicious, not dirty, if that makes sense. And I think it sort of lingers in the dirty territory. But still a good map. I think it's quite carried by the music. But, you know, I do enjoy it. You know, it's a pretty fun course. Coming in at number 59. This is where I think we're arguably probably starting to move up a tier again into the sort of C tier territory. This is Electrodrome. Again, I could see this being higher on a lot of people's lists just because of the way it looks. I mean, it absolutely nails its theme of this sort of, like, disco, modern, neon lights aesthetic. And, you know, I do love the way it looks. I think when I first played this map, I thought, oh my god, this is going to be easily one of my favorite maps in the game. I do think the way that it races, it feels a little bit simplistic. Sort of has that same sort of... you know, they go for this racing type in quite a few levels in Mario Kart 8. In Ice Outpost, in Sweet Mountain, I think it's Sweet... I can't remember what that course is called, but in the Candy Mountain one, they have this one where it will, like, split off into two divulging paths, but there's not too much dissimilarities with the two branching paths, so it kind of makes it feel a little bit gimmicky to me. That's kind of the main drawback for it. I know I'm kind of overanalyzing there a little bit, but... for me, I do get a little bit, you know, it kind of gives you the illusion of choice, like, oh, is it going to be the purple or the green route? But then there isn't much that changes, you know, between the purple and the green route. And it would have been cool to see it sort of, like, fleshed out a bit more, and you see something completely different each direction that you go. Nonetheless, I do enjoy the course a lot. It sort of feels like it has this rhythm to the course and this build-up to the course. And the final jump is one of the better glider sections of the map. And I really like the boom boxes, and the piranha plants at the end look so cool with the flashing colours. Just absolutely nailed the aesthetic, and it's definitely in the upper tier for aesthetics of maps, just not in difficulty or, you know, enjoyment for actually racing the course, I feel. At number 58, we have Super Bell Subway. If you guys are familiar with Modern Warfare 3, this map just super reminds me of the art style that Modern Warfare 3 was going for, and I think they had one where it was like an underground train station. Sort of, they did something similar in Battlefield as well. I can't remember if it was Battlefield 4. I think it was Battlefield 4 where they had like a train station map. So it does sort of remind me of those like modern military, like urban games, and the aesthetic for me is probably the biggest drawback, but I think the more you race this, the more you realize, like, this is one of the more difficult Mario Kart tracks, and one of the more, like, fun and chaotic. And what I said earlier about Toad's Turnpike, you know, not getting too experimental with having vehicles driving at you and causing chaos, I feel like this one takes a lot more risks in that department. The shortcuts are pretty complex and pretty difficult to master, and you kind of have to, you know, analyze how you're going to take a turn and how you're going to, you know, approach sections of the map, and I really like that. I really like the challenges that it offers, and it definitely feels like this map, you know, each time you race it, it feels like a different race. So, you know, there's parts where you'll get more off-road than you wanted to, there's parts where you'll take more shortcuts, there's parts where you'll take less shortcuts, there's parts where you'll get messed up by the trains, or there are parts where you'll weave in and out of the trains quite well. And you know, overall, it's just a pretty darn enjoyable race. If I had to change something, it would be the way that it looks. Something looks a little bit vapid about it, a little bit empty in terms of just like the color palettes and stuff like that. But nonetheless, you know, it's a really good race, and it's definitely grown on me. I wasn't really drawn to it when I first started playing Mario Kart 8. But over time, it became, you know, one of my preferred tracks to get in the game. So, yeah, definitely enjoy it. At number 57, we have Sunshine Airport. I probably wouldn't have initially predicted myself putting Sunshine Airport this high. I just can't see myself putting it lower just because of how great it looks. Like, they absolutely nailed the airport aesthetic. And it used to be a similar appeal to, again, talking about Call of Duty, I didn't expect to talk about Call of Duty this much, but Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the map Terminal, it sort of reminds me of that. But if anything, they might have done an even better job of bringing the airport aesthetic to life. I absolutely love racing inside of the little bits of the aeroplanes and racing underneath them and racing alongside them. I think it does a really, really standout job. Now, the only reason it can't go higher than this is, again, simplicity in track design. It is very, can be very monotonous in terms of the way that you actually race it. I do like the little shortcuts on it. There's the shortcut at the end where you hop over the little escalator section. Absolutely love pulling off that shortcut. And then also, I really enjoy the section where you can sort of, you can jump off the little railing section and then cut the grass early, you know, initially, instead of going through the plane. I like the shortcuts on it. I think they're fun, but you know, difficulty-wise, it could have been more challenging, for sure. But it's carried by its superb aesthetic, and they really committed to the theme of airport, and I think they nailed it. They never faltered once, you know, just from start to finish, it looks incredible, and it plays pretty great too. So, yeah, great map. Coming in at 56, we have the Animal Crossing map. I think they went above and beyond in bringing Animal Crossing to a Mario Kart game. You know, if you're gonna do it, it's so nice to have something done faithfully to the game. And really, you know, brings the characters to life, brings the world to life. The seasonal changes is an amazing touch too, and I actually really like the way this map races. You know, I think it puts in a glider section at the right time. It has the right twists and turns, and it's just fun to race. Having the power-ups be, you know, dropped in via the balloons was a genius idea too, and overall there's just not much bad I can say about it. You know, would I have it be more challenging? Of course I would. You know, is that why it's as low as it is? Yeah, if this was more challenging, I could see this being a top Mario Kart track for me personally. Like, I think it looks great. And I'm actually a big fan of Animal Crossing New Horizons. I played it a pretty intense amount, to be fair, when it came out. You know, I played that game probably at least 100 hours. So to get a chance to play through it on a Mario Kart game was a great experience, and one that I couldn't really turn down. So overall, great map. My favourite season's probably the winter season. You know, I'm a sucker for a snow map, and I think it looks great. But to be honest, all around, I think they did a great job of capturing all the seasons of it, and it's just a great map. Never disappointed when this comes up, and is always a good time. So yeah, Good stuff. At number 55, we have GBA Ribbon Road. And the thing I probably value most about this course is just how, like, solid and consistent it is. I never really have a bad time on Ribbon Road. Someone votes Ribbon Road, I'm never disappointed because I know I'm going to have this base level of fun. It's fun to look at, the aesthetic's fun, just being a little miniature and feeling like a toy in a world is great. And, you know, to be honest, I think this was the standout track from the GBA, you know, Mario Kart game, and to see it faithfully recreated in this, but with even better visuals, is just a treat. The shortcuts are great on this one. I feel like there's actually a bit of setup to the way that you want to approach these shortcuts. On 200cc, I feel like this map goes above and beyond. I love the actual models of the carts in the background, where you got the teddy buggy in the background. You know, in general, it's just always a fun time to race this one. And I say that even being had, like, I've had an insane amount of bullshit thrown my way on this track. I don't know what it is, but Ribbon Road has definitely been a little bit cursed for me. I seem to, I think what happens is I go for these, like, gnarly shortcut attempts, which I just should not be going for, where I don't have, like, the right setup for it at all, at the right time. And I'll just mess up tragically on it. But overall, it's a really, really fun course. Looks great, and it sort of gives me that Toy Story vibe, and I'm a huge fan of Toy Story 1, the original, and Toy Story 2, to be honest. So, you know, I really like that. And it sort of also brings me back to, if you guys ever played Micro Machines, that's going back a long way, but that was a game where you were sort of a miniature car, and you just drove through these, like, you know, gigantic human areas, but you were a small miniature car. I love that vibe. And I think they do it, you know, great justice in this game in particular. So, yeah, in general, big fan of Ribbon Road. At number 54, we have Dragon Driftway. For me, this is one of the maps where I started seeing the potential of Mario Kart 8 a lot more. This came out on the initial wave of DLC, I believe. And it just had a bit more difficulty. I really liked the theme. I didn't actually realize till quite recently that it was themed after Mario Galaxy boss. I can't remember its name, but the dragon that you find in Super Mario Galaxy. And I absolutely love that idea too. But I also just love that sort of like Chinese architecture style, where it looks quite like imperialistic. Absolutely love it. And it's a bit of a treat to race. I really like the shortcuts. And I think it's one of the ones that do, you know, they have those spinny things that you hit and they give you a little mini boost. I think this is one of the better maps for doing that, because some of them, they just feel a bit pointless in the anti-gravity sections. But in this map, they actually feel really refreshing, and, you know, they sort of position them in places that, you know, present a nice challenge. You get a little burst of speed that could mess up your turn, but could give you that tiny bit of speed and momentum that you need to push you over the edge. So, overall, I think it's a great track. I think it's a little bit... some of the turns don't feel like they were built to be good turns, if that makes sense. Like, it doesn't always feel like it was built with a master plan. That's probably the one criticism I'd say about it. But I do, overall, enjoy the map quite a bit. And, again... it definitely brought me back to Mario Kart 8 when I didn't really like the initial wave of maps too much. And then I played this one and I was like, hey, you know what? This one's really grabbed me. I really have a lot of time for this map. So yeah, definitely a big fan. At number 3, we have Wario's Gold Mine from the Wii. Now, I've got some opinions about this map that you guys might not be ready to hear. Or maybe you are ready to hear. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't. I don't know. Make your own mind up. But I was a huge, huge fan of Wario's Gold Mine on the Wii, and I think it lost a bit of its luster going into Mario Kart 8. Just too much of the difficulty was taken away. The mine carts being like bounce pads that you boost off, I'm not here for it. You know, that was just such an identifying factor of the map, that, like, you know, those could push you off. It was always so funny when I, like, raced with my friends and some of them would just get knocked off, like, 3 times by the carts. I always thought that was hilarious. And, you know, it was possible to race around them. So, why did they just put, like... it's like putting the stabilizers on a bicycle. I just don't get why they did it. And then they've got that shortcut to the left, which before, you know, on Wii... On Wii Goldmine, if you avoided the carts and you took that left way, you got like a safer way and it had the boost pads and it made it really fast. On this one, it just categorically feels slower and worse to do that shortcut. And I just don't really know why they just took a back step. Now, don't get me wrong, aesthetically, when you go underground, they've pretty much nailed how it should look. And I like the little music changes where you start hearing like the mining in the music and it's like on beat, on rhythm. I love that aspect of it. You know, visually, they probably pretty much nailed how it should look in this game, and it probably looks better than the Wii counterpart. But gameplay-wise, it doesn't hit. Like, it feels like the likelihood that you're going to run off the map is so low, whereas in the Wii version, it felt so high. It feels like the likelihood of getting bumped by those, you know, minecarts, now that is a literal 0, because you're not going to get bumped by them. It's just a shame. It loses so much of that difficulty and the frantic fun. And the complaint I was making earlier about Nintendo losing sight that difficulty can be a fun thing and a challenge isn't always a bad thing, I think they really missed the mark for this one. And, you know, if you were going to get rid of that challenge, maybe add in a challenge somewhere else or spice something else somewhere else, but they don't really, so it just feels like a step back, and I feel like that's unfortunate. Coming in at number 52, we've got Cloud Top Cruise. Obviously, some pretty faithful nods to a bit of Mario Galaxy coming in, and as I was saying earlier, I like Sky Garden a lot for its like cloud top aesthetic, and obviously Cloud Top Cruise takes that to an even higher extent. I absolutely love the way this map plays and the way the map looks. I do think they could do a little bit more leading into Mario Galaxy, because I absolutely love Mario Galaxy, and if you actually think about it, in terms of Mario Kart tracks, they don't always like take and capitalize as much on 3D Mario game aesthetics or like levels from that as much as they could, and I think it's a bit of a shame really, because there's so many cool aspects to take from. It's almost like when Nintendo, like, they have such a good backlog of content that they can't possibly take from everything that they have, which is a nice problem to have as Nintendo. You know, I always feel, you know, when it comes to their remakes, when it comes to their games, and people are like, why can't they just remake this? Why can't they just remake this? So there's so much stuff that they just want to, you know, people want them to do it for everything. Whereas you look at something like Xbox are constantly remaking stuff and constantly rebranding stuff, and they wish they had more stuff. You know, they try and buy out Nintendo so they have their extensive library. But this track, you know, it's got a really awesome vibe to it. It's got a bit of that Gusty Garden Galaxy in the soundtrack. And I love the Storm Cloud area which you get to. Could it be a bit more difficult, and would I be happier? Absolutely. Could it lean more into the Mario Galaxy aesthetic? Absolutely. But overall, I think the drawbacks of this map are pretty low, and it's generally a really favourable experience, you know, racing through this map. And I really do enjoy it a lot. At number 51, we've got N64 Yoshi Valley. Yoshi Valley was a bit of a weird one for them to remake, I feel like, because on the N64, if you ever played it, it was quite a bizarre map. Basically, it was really confusing. It was a bit of a labyrinth of a map to explore, and the shortcuts were very, very tricky. Probably one of the few times where I don't mind them simplifying the gameplay a little bit more, because the shortcuts were ridiculous on this map. Like, they were really tricky back in the day. And I actually think I prefer this version of the map quite a bit more, both aesthetically and just in the way that the gameplay plays out, because, you know, again, the N64 wasn't particularly streamlined, and then its other gimmick was that on the mini-map, it would randomize the positions and the icons, so you didn't know who was in first place, and didn't really make much sense, to be honest. Like, you didn't know what position you were in, the position counter was all bugged, and you kind of had to guess where you were in the race. So it was interesting, but it was kind of unnecessary, you know. It felt like a tacked-on gimmick. In this one, it feels like it's a chance to race Yoshi Valley as like a fleshed-out course, and I think it makes a lot more sense. And I like the different routes, and I like the way that it plays out, and I really like the lighting that it uses. It's sort of a little bit different to what you expect from most Mario Kart maps to look like, and it's got quite a nice ambience to it. And I love going for the shortcuts at the end of this map as well. Really feels like a neat shortcut section at the end of the map. So overall, solid map. Is it my favourite? No. But is it a good map? Hell yeah. Rounding off another decade of Mario Kart 8 maps, we've got Mount Wario. Again, I think this might be a bit of a love-hate course. I've definitely heard some people bad-mouthing this course and saying, it comes up too much and they hate it. I actually quite enjoy it. I do think it's a little bit on the overplayed side because, again, I didn't think the initial 32 maps of Mario Kart 8 were that great. And I think, as a result, like, this one was definitely stood out as one of the better ones from it. And I think, as a result, it got overplayed and over-centralized in the meta just because it was a better course. I personally love the feeling of it. It almost feels like an ice triathlon where you've got the start of the mountain, then it gets a little bit more like there's woods in the middle and it gets a little bit more chaotic, and then you've got that final ski slope at the end. It kind of feels like it combines so many elements within one map. You've got the water section in the middle as well, which I think is one of the better water sections in the game and uses the glider really nicely. Overall, I think it's actually just a super pleasant map to look at and to race through. And I said earlier, I like when a map feels like it has a narrative, and I definitely feel like this map does a really great job of having like a cohesive narrative throughout the game, of just feeling like you're starting at the top of this gigantic mountain and you're slowly making your way down through the different sections, the varied sections, and it always feels fresh. It feels like each little portion of this map could be part of a good map, you know, a part of its own good individual map, but it ties it all together to make it, you know, one giant map. And I think that's great. It's kind of got the vibes of like a Woohoo Mountain from Mario Kart 3DS, and I love that map, and I really like this one too. The end is probably the most disappointing aspect of it, because it is just kind of like a straight down with not too much. Again, I think that ties into the problem Mario Kart 8 has with like 150cc, where doesn't give you the like most extreme feeling of speed, and it becomes, you know, over-reliant on the power-ups again in that section. But it's a pretty small drawback, and I think it's overall a really, really good time and a fun map. Coming up next at number 49, we have GBA Riverside Park. I think I said earlier briefly that Ribbon Road might be the best GBA map, but I meant that more within the framework of GBA, you know, Super Mario Circuit. For the Game Boy Advanced. But I think, in terms of ports, what they've done with Riverside Park here is, I absolutely love it. I absolutely love the vibe. It's sort of like dusk time. It's such a pleasant time on this map. And there's not too many maps that, again, fill this niche of this aesthetic within Mario Kart 8. And it's always great when you get a different look and a different theme within a course, because it sort of stands out. The cave at the end, the spiral section at the end is super enjoyable to race, and it's so short but sweet, which is great. Sometimes I love having a map that is short but sweet. You know, it doesn't outstay its welcome. It fits in really nicely with a bunch of other courses. You know, let's say you do a marathon of 10 tracks and this is in the middle. It's always such a nice like diversion to the other maps that you're playing. If you race something like Mount Wario or Bowser's Castle and then you come into this, it's just such a nice change of pace and such a nice change of rhythm when it comes to racing in Mario Kart 8. And, you know, this was quite a big surprise for me. I think first time I raced it, I didn't think much of it, but it definitely grew on me really, really quickly. And I was like, oh, okay, like, this is one I could just keep racing forever and ever and ever, and I don't think I'd get bored of it. Really fun time. So, yeah. At number 48, we have Cooper Cape. I would call this a bit of an upset for how low this is, because Cooper Cape I was absolutely insane for. I love Cooper Cape. I love the music, love the vibes. I love a good water level. And Cooper Cape was just, that was possibly one of my favorite maps in Wii, if not like, you know, top 3, honestly, Cooper Cape. Absolutely loved it. I wouldn't say this course is like a major, you know, this rendition of Cooper Cape is a major letdown. I just don't think it works particularly well with the mechanics. I think one of the reasons why Cooper Cape was so good is because I think the Wii mechanics of Mario Kart, especially on 150cc, are like peak. Like, I think that's just, for me, in terms of like challenging gameplay and enjoyable gameplay, I think Wii just absolutely thrives in the sense of speed. And this map hasn't actually got that many great shortcuts and that many challenging sections, even on the Wii version. I think it's more about, you know, the sense of speed that the River Rapids gave you and going into the underground tunnel and trying to avoid those electric shock sections. You know, it just had so much to it. And I don't think Mario Kart 8, like, just base racing can stand up to Mario Kart Wii's. You know, and some of the other renditions that they do of Mario Kart Wii remakes in Mario Kart 8, they mitigate how I feel about the mechanics by having really good shortcuts or really good use of shortcuts in the game. And I just think in this one, because Cooper Cape didn't start off having that great shortcuts, it couldn't really achieve the same effect. Nonetheless, it is a great time. I'm definitely not saying it's a bad map. It just doesn't stand out to me as one, like, that I'll always guaranteed no matter what vote, and, like, one that, like, you know, stands on the, you know, Hall of Fame like I think Cooper Cape and Wii does. It's still a great map, and they, you know, they didn't take anything away from it in, like, a horrible way where it's like, oh, God, why did they change this? They didn't need to change this, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, it remains, you know, pretty damn faithful, and I think it looks great. It's just, I know that Wii Cooper Cape hits a little bit different. It goes that extra mile. It just feels fucking awesome to race. So, yeah. Number 47, we've got Royal Raceway from the N64. This is definitely a really good track from the N64 version of the game, and I think they did an even better job of it in Mario Kart 8. Like I was saying earlier with N64... I can't remember what track it was, Toad's Turnpike. How the difficulty was pretty crazy on the N64, and then they toned it down a lot in this version of the game. It's kind of similar in this, where they toned down the difficulty, but I think it was a good change, because on Royal Raceway N64, like, the ending section was pretty frustrating with how easily you could fall off, and how badly punished you were for falling off. This one just feels like a really great time. I absolutely love the aesthetic of it. I've always loved Royal Raceway, Peach's Castle, you know, Mario N64. I'm a Mario N64 fanboy, so just being able to see that with such high graphical fidelity compared to previous iterations just feels awesome. And I just love the way this map plays. Again, you don't really seem to have a bad time on Royal Raceway ever. I've always had fun races on it. And it definitely feels like you can make some last-minute clutch plays towards the end. I quite like the shortcuts of it. The addition of, like, cherry blossoms and the falling cherry blossom leaves is really, really pleasant. And it's just, it's always great to have a map that is great to look at. You know, it will keep you coming back because, you know, visually you just connect good memories to it because of how nice it looks. So yeah, overall, Royal Raceway, I think it earns its place. And is a, you know, very fun, very enjoyable map to race. At number 46, we've got Bangkok Rush, another Mario Kart Tour map, and it's been a little while since we've had a Mario Kart Tour map, and I think that's because you're going to see that the quality of the Tour maps increases a lot more, I think, in the upper section of my tier list. And I think Bangkok Rush sits kind of in the middle of the Tour tracks, upper middle, I would say, but is a great track overall. I really love what the map goes for in terms of the way that you race it. Aesthetically, it probably isn't my favorite. It kind of reminds me a bit of like a Super Bell Subway in that I love the challenges it presents, and I love the difficulty it presents, but I don't always like the way that it looks. I don't hate the way that it looks, either. It just wouldn't, like, rank amongst my top maps for in terms of looks. It's a little bit of a muddy brown colour to it, but I love the river sections on this. I love all the tricking sections on this. I love the visual differences from portion, you know, each portion of the map. And overall, like, the challenge it offers is just really fun. Like, you really feel like there's a lot of scope for outplay on this map. And again, this is why I started liking the DLCs a little bit more, because the scope for outplay just increased with the DLCs, I think. And, you know, scope for potential shortcuts, and different routes, and taking smarter routes, and taking smarter lines. I think Bangkok Rush does a really great job of you know, rewarding you for racing the map differently and expertly. So yeah, it's just a really good time, and it was a bit of a surprise, really, because I didn't like the way that it looked. I didn't expect to get on well with this map. So it was a nice surprise when I was like, you know what, this map is actually really, really fun to race, and taking the top sections up the stairs and stuff like that. You know, it's just a good time. It's always a good time, and I definitely recommend, you know, learning this map if you haven't already. Coming in hot at number 45, we've got Madrid Drive. That's 2 tour tracks back to back, and to be honest, I think it was pretty close with Bangkok Rush. There's just a couple key features of this map that I think separated it and, you know, made it a little bit higher than Bangkok Rush. The shortcuts, for one, I love in this map. I love that you actually go through a little market shortcut, where it's like they look like street markets, and you take it inside and you go for a little shortcut. Absolutely love that. I also love the museum area on this map, and I think the music and the theme is just a little bit more distinct than Bangkok Rush. Took me a little bit of time to memorize it. It did kind of have that little bit of tour problem where some parts of the map I don't feel like are like super visually distinct. But the parts that are work really, really well, especially the museum section with the art gallery section. That was just something I hadn't really seen in a Mario Kart map. And it's always kind of nice when you just see something a little bit surreal in a Mario Kart game where you're like, oh, I've never seen this sort of aesthetic, you know, in a Mario Kart game. And that's kind of the appeal, I think, for tour maps in general, is like you see almost like realistic aspects, you know, in a game that you don't normally see that. You know, you're normally seeing like Mario worlds and fantasy worlds, whereas Tour gives you a chance to see like real world life aspects, but intermingled with, you know, the Mario aspects. And that's why it's so cool to see the Wigglers as well walking around through Madrid. I definitely think, you know, more things like that where they go a little bit off the wall with the enemy types, and, you know, how they fit into the world is a really creative and fun idea. And Madrid Drive, you know, we got it quite late. I think it was on the last DLC offering, or maybe the second to last, but I think it was, it was a great little addition that came in last minute as a pretty fun tour track, I think. So, yeah, definitely hats off to this one. And at number 44, we've got Maple Treeway from the Wii. And kind of my feelings line up a little bit similarly to how I was talking about Cooper Cape, where I feel like the mechanics of Mario Kart Wii were so superb, and there's not that much crazy shortcuts in Maple Treeway. You know, you got the shortcut at the start, where you take the right route, and yeah, that's about it really for shortcuts on this map. But it's just a testament to Mario Kart Wii's gameplay that this map was still so fun, because, you know, for example, when you ride on the spines of those trees and the tree branches, it felt so dangerous. Like, it felt like you could fall off at any point. Whereas on Mario Kart 8, that just feels a little bit less likely to happen, because it kind of feels like it almost has like safety net gameplay. You know, maybe you get more of an experience from that from 200cc. But one thing I haven't talked about really that is kind of the problem with 200cc is I feel like 200cc is almost too fast. You know, it doesn't really recreate that feeling of speed from Mario Kart Wii, because it's almost like absurdly fast, and it doesn't always line up with, you know, how the maps are designed. It almost feels like a little bit absurd in its speed. But in general, Maple Treeway is still a banger. The theme is such a banger, and it looks so great that still going to rank fairly highly on my list. I just think it could have gone further if the mechanics were a bit different, or maybe if they experimented with shortcuts and difficulty a little bit more. I think the race in general has quite a wide berth, or sorry, the track has quite a wide berth to it. So it just makes it feel a lot more simple, a lot more straightforward than it did on Mario Kart Wii. It was one of the more difficult tracks, I think, on Mario Kart Wii. And I don't think it feels that difficult at all. So therefore, it just feels a little bit less memorable than how it did on Mario Kart Wii. Still a good track. Don't feel like I'm like stabbing it in the back. You know, they did such a good job with the aesthetic and the presentation that it doesn't take too much away. It just can't reach those high levels of Mario Kart Wii Maple Treeway, in my opinion. Number 43, we have Piranha Plant Cove. Now, this map has a big problem for me that is unique to this map, and definitely potentially hinders its position on the tier list. And that is, for me anyway, it might not happen for you guys, but no one votes this map. Literally no one votes this map. I've had it come up so many times, and the amount of times it doesn't get voted for, and I'm the only person in the room voting for it, is insane, and I have no idea why. Like, maybe it's because it's a tour map, and people get a bit funny about tour maps that they don't recognize. Like, with the location-based tour maps, you know, people can vote it because they're like, oh, London, cool, but, like, when it's, like, a tour map that they don't know, it hasn't got that, like, nostalgia or immediate, like, connection for a lot of people. That's my only guess. But I think this map's great. Like, I love it. It kind of reminds me of Pirates of the Caribbean. I think it's one that really thrives from its underwater section. It's the best using underwater. And to be honest, this could be higher. Like, if I was to make another Mario Kart tier list. God forbid, because, my lord, this one has been long to make. But if I did have that temptation, I think this could be higher if I managed to play it more. I don't really see it going down. But when I have raced it, you know, it's been really fast-paced, it's been really fun, dynamic, and the theme is just great to look at. You know, it's just a map that is constantly enjoyable to look at, you know, pretty much across the board. And it's kind of sick, like it was a late addition, you know, onto the DLC, and I think it really, I think they really found their stride in picking and adapting Mario Kart Tour tracks into Mario Kart 8. I imagine they might have even heard some of the criticisms about earlier Tour maps, and they kind of went all out for some of the later ones. I don't know if that's the case. Maybe they pre-made them and they just stacked the better ones towards the end. That's possible, but regardless, I think it's a great time. It looks great, it races great, and is the best underwater iteration of a Mario Kart map in Mario Kart 8. So, hats off to it. At 42, we have Amsterdam Drift, another tour map. I don't know why I piled so many tour maps together. I don't remember doing that, but here we are. I love this map. I think this map's great. I think it is one of the better maps, tour maps, at using the location well. It really gives me the vibe of Amsterdam, you know, all the stereotypes. To be fair, I've never been to Amsterdam, but exactly what I would expect from Amsterdam and some of the cooler aspects from Amsterdam, it's kind of what it looks like to me, or kind of like what a picturesque view of Amsterdam might look like. And it's just an absolute treat to race through. Visually, it looks great, it's bright, it's colourful. Just the right amount of sunshine, and I love the underwater section. It's also got great underwater sections. You know, I think towards the end of the DLCs, they started finding their stride with how to use underwater sections in interesting ways. And here, just being able to go along the canal boats and, you know, sort of through, like, what looks like a kind of sewer system, but it's, like, cleaner, obviously, it's not dirty. But, yeah, it's just a great time. And I, personally, always get a kick out of this one coming up. And I feel like people don't vote for it too much, and I think that's a shame, because I think it's actually a really, really, really great map. And I love the section towards the end. It feels like a really nice send-off for the map. It's really peaceful and serene the way you go through the, like, flower fields. Tulips, I think they are, or I don't know if they're tulips. I shouldn't even guess. What do I know about flowers? But, you know, a great time, and I think it's a little bit underrated, to be honest, from what I hear people talking about it. Yeah, I like it a lot. Coming in cool, blue, and watery at number 41, we have Big Blue. Big Blue, for some people, they might consider this an upset where it's placed. Maybe they think it should be higher. I'm not really sure. I like Big Blue a lot. I think the shortcuts are cool, if not a little bit gimmicky. If you actually look at the shortcut on this map, it's where you do this huge jump, and it looks really, really cool and badass. But it actually, apparently in time trials, it saves, like, a really, really small amount of time, like a half a second or a second, I don't know, like, not much, basically. And, you know, it is great. I'm an F-Zero fan. I'm an F-Zero diehard fan. You might have thought I didn't put this high because I don't like F-Zero or something like that. That's not the case at all. I absolutely love F-Zero. To me, this track, and kind of Mute City as well, they feel like they should be 200cc tracks. They race best on 200cc. And I do love the aesthetic of it. There's just something a little bit simple about it. I think one of the main things I associate with F-Zero is the feeling of dread. Of, like, you might fall off the map at any time and you go, like, absurdly out of control fast at all times. Whereas I never feel like that on the Big Blue Mario Kart rendition. So, in that sense, I feel like it's not as faithful to F-Zero as I would personally like. I'm just such an F-Zero fan that, you know, I have high standards for how I'd want to see it replicate. And it doesn't overly feel like Big Blue either. It feels like definitely a Mario Kart remix of Big Blue, which I think is fine. It's definitely a good map. I have nothing, you know, overly against it. I always have a good time on it. I just, you know, if I was being nitpicky, I'd have it be more like F-Zero. But, you know, a solid placing, 41, nothing to scoff at, and it's a good map. At number 40, we have Wee Daisy Circuit. Bit of a surprise for me that this was remade. I never really thought too much of Daisy Circuit of the Wii. I never thought it was a bad map. It was just a definite, like, solid, middle of the pack, like, good Mario Kart Wii map, but not, like, a crazy map. But I'm kind of glad that they brought it back. It's a nice map. It's always, you know, it's never a letdown to race through, and I think they did it really, you know, it's a really pretty map, to be honest with you. You know, they definitely faithfully recreated it. I like the ending part where you race across the ledge towards the end, and I love the mood lighting in this. I'd definitely say it's one of the remakes which is superior for me to the Mario Kart Wii version. Just because the aesthetic just beats it for me. I think it suits... You know, there's some levels where, like, the arcadey gameplay and the arcadey feel lends itself to the Wii art style, and then there's some levels where I feel like the Mario Kart 8 art style is better for. And I think Daisy Circuit is one that the Mario Kart 8, you know, this wanted a pretty sort of beach-lit, sort of moonlit with a lighthouse and stuff like that, and it just takes advantage of the graphical style and the graphical fidelity much more in this game, and I think I prefer racing it in this to Mario Kart Wii, which is always nice. You know, it's always nice to revisit a map and also enjoy it more on this game than the previous game. And I love the fact that the shortcut is boarded up and you get to throw a shell at it. Overall, I just like all the decisions they made with this particular remake, and, you know, it's in pretty much every way better for my personal tastes. So yeah, I'm a big fan. Coming in at number 39, this is Vancouver Velocity. This is probably a time to mention that we're probably going up a tier again in sort of maps to that sort of CB tier. I'm not sure what tier we're at, but we're at a higher tier. Vancouver Velocity is a great map, and it was a really pleasant surprise. I felt absolutely nothing. You know, I know nothing of Canada. I have no excitement towards Canada. It's not that I hate Canada. I just know so little about it and have so little interest in it. And this map just being good was just a really, really nice surprise. I think the music for it's great. I love the Northern Lights in the background. I love just the sort of Christmassy winter vibe to it. Racing through the hockey stadium towards the end. It's overall just a really seamless experience, and definitely one of the premier tour maps for my tastes. I think, you know, if I was Canadian, I'd be like, damn, this is sick. I can't believe they did such a good Canada map. You know, especially when you look at some of the main line locations, like Tokyo Blur, which didn't get that great. You know, New York Minute didn't get that great. A lot of them kind of fell short, and then Vancouver just feels like it's absolutely great. It's like, I don't know what sort of pulled them in directions of making some maps just feel like they had so much attention to detail and went all out for, and then other maps just feel like they were kind of borderline cobbled together. It might have been that it came later in Mario Kart Tour's, you know, release schedule. I don't really know. I haven't really followed or played much of Mario Kart Tour, but this map to me is definitely one of the standout maps, and I absolutely love it, and it's always a delight to play through. At number 38, we have Rosalina's Ice World, which for me is, you know, a lot of people actually are very, very hit and miss on this map, and I know it's got kind of a vocal proportion of people that didn't want to see this remade and don't really like it and find it really boring. I never understood that. I liked this the second I played it first. Now, it might be because I'm a sucker for the ice aesthetic and the winter aesthetic, but then also the little, like, Mario Galaxy references, just the way that you race through it. I actually think there's a lot to like about this race. And I was really happy that I saw it get remade, and I think it's the best version of it. I think it's better than the version on the 3DS. It looks just so crispy and clean in the HD of the Switch, and it's just a joy to race through, and I don't think it outstays its welcome. I like the little shortcut at the end. I love the ice caverns. Just overall a great one. Like, it could probably lean into the Galaxy and the Rosalina aesthetic a little bit more. I won't argue that. But the areas in which it does lean into them, I absolutely love. And I love the little town area at the start, and it just, something feels like really cozy and nostalgic about this map. Like coming home for Christmas, and everything's just right, and you've got that little bit of warmth from a fire. It kind of gives me those vibes where I'm just like, I'm happy to be racing Mario Kart when I'm racing this level, is what I would say. I actually quite like the aspect where, like, if you get a boost or whatever, like, the ice panels start falling apart, but you can boost to sort of get onto the top area, and the top area is a bit faster. Gives you something to think about. It's a nice challenge without being too much to think about, and I just overall enjoy it quite a lot. At number 37, we have Bowser's Castle. I've got pretty high standards for Bowser's Castle levels, and when this first came out, I was a little bit disappointed by it because I didn't think it measured up to N64 Bowser's Castle, Wii Bowser's Castle, probably even GameCube Bowser's Castle, and I still kind of feel that way. Just the only thing I would say is even a lesser Bowser's Castle is still probably going to be a great Bowser's Castle. I love Bowser's Castle. I love the vibes. I love the gothic architecture. And this one, I think, does the visuals of Bowser's Castle the best. Like, oh my god, it looks so cool. I wish the challenge was a bit harder, yeah, because it looks like the most menacing Bowser's Castle that we've seen yet. Like, the fire statue of Bowser that's moving, like the animatronic thing, just the lava fields, everything about this, I absolutely adore the way it looks. Like, might be one of my top looking tracks. And Bowser's Castle from the outside just looks like an absolute monolith, an absolute force. Could have been, honestly, one of the best Mario Kart tracks ever. You put Mario Kart Wii mechanics and having to wheelie and having to focus on that, you know, you might capture my attention a little bit more. But nonetheless, still a great map. And it has really grown on me the more I've played it. The more I put aside my feelings for what standards I think of Bowser's Castle should reach, and the more I just, like, enjoyed what it is for what it is. I absolutely love this level. And it's definitely, like, I think this is my highest ranking Mario Kart 8. Don't quote me on that. We might get to one later on and I'll remember. But I think this might be the highest ranking, like, base Mario Kart 8 track. I'll have to check that later on. But absolutely love it. Top map. And really, really impressive. At number 35, we have Mute City. Again, like I said, I'm an F-Zero fan. I think this is, for me, the superior, the more traditional, the more iconic of the two F-Zero maps that they put in. And I think it does a better job of, like, recreating what F-Zero feels like. Definitely not identical to Mute City on the N64 or on the SNES, for that matter. But it's a really fun time, and I think the simplicity of this serves it better, and it feels more like it belongs in an F-Zero game than the Big Blue iteration does. The speed of the boost panels is really, really fun to pick up, and it's actually got one of my favourite shortcuts on a level, which is the shortcut towards the end, where you take a sharp right to start the ramp. It's just something you have to, like, kind of prepare yourself mentally for, and a lot of people don't take that shortcut. So if you win a race taking that shortcut, it just feels great. Like, it feels really, really satisfying to pull off, because it's not the easiest. It's in a bit of a blind spot, that shortcut. And racing down the end, it's got one of the best, like, finishing ramps to a level, I think, as well, where it's like, it really feels like a dart for the finish, and there's been so many close calls that I've had on that. So, yeah, in general, when the F-Zero maps came out and were getting released, I thought it was a great idea. I think, you could have honestly just kept releasing DLC and kept releasing, like, F-Zero style maps, and they would have banged, and it would have been cool to see some of the more, like, off-the-wall F-Zero tracks, because, like I said, big fan of F-Zero X and GX, so to see some of them be recreated would have been really, really cool. But good map, doesn't quite reach, like, the peak of maps in the game for me, but on 200cc, this map's a treat and is a really enjoyable time. At number 34, we're at GBA Snowland, another GBA track, which I think I forgot I put this high, but I absolutely love this track. This track's great. One of the main reasons it's good is because, again, with the DLCs in Mario Kart 8, the late stage season pass DLCs, or a fighter, what do they call it? There's so many passes these days, I forget what it's called. But with this later stage DLC, I think that the commitment to allowing shortcuts on this race and the cut across the snow towards the beginning of the map, it's a pretty crazy cut. Like, it's a pretty substantial cut, and the fact they actually allow you to do that really brings this map to life. Like, cuts are everything, especially in Mario Kart 8. Like, I think the cuts are what brings the game to life, and they do a great job. The aesthetic is also really nice. The music is also really nice. Snow maps, again, sucker for a good snow map, and I think it's a good snow map. I think the turns are just challenging enough. It's got another hairpin turn. I think hairpin turns are just fun in Mario Kart. You know, you put a hairpin turn in, you've got my attention. I will say this is another one of these maps that has a bit of an X factor in a bad way of just, this is one of these maps that has just BS'd me uncontrollable amounts. I don't know why. I think I get too greedy and too antsy towards the end of the stage where I just want to take some shortcut or just go a bit nutty at the end, and I end up screwing it all, risking it all, screwing it all. So that does make me hate Snowland mildly, and, you know, may bias it to be low on the list than it could be. But overall, good track, like it a lot, nice retro, and, you know, GBA's done well in Mario Kart 8. I think it's, you know, almost had like a revival of interest in the maps from GBA, and I think that's a good thing, for sure. 33, we have Mario Circuit. This was a bit of a pleasant surprise for me, this one. I absolutely love this track, and I probably didn't expect to, just like looking at it from the offset. I remember thinking, ugh, why did they do this map? This map feels so simple. They could have done so many tracks. And I kept racing it, and I was like, God, I just have fun with this track every single time I race it. It just consistently comes back as a fun track. I love taking the shortcuts on it. I love the visuals of it. I love how much grass is on it. I know that sounds like a simple thing, but I do. You know, it's nice. Seeing a bit of grass, nothing wrong with it. A bit of sunlit grass. You get the God rays coming through beyond the trees. In the middle portion of the map, it's just a nice time. It's always a good time. I like the way that the end has these hairpin turns again. It gets a little bit crazy. It feels like you have to clutch up at the end. You know, if you're messing up, you can just clutch out a really good sharp turn, set of sharp turns towards the end, and there's always good shortcuts to take. It feels like you can have a big effect on the race. I like it when racers have an impact on the race. I think Mario Kart 8 is at its worst when you feel like you can't have an impact on the course. You know, it's just sort of like, it's almost like playing slot machines, you know what I mean? And I don't feel like this map feels like that, which is nice, you know, especially as it sort of visually looks like it could be a beginner-friendly course. But I do think there's a lot you can do to separate yourself from the other racers and race well. It's kind of like really simple and shallow looking at the surface, and then you play it more and you sink your teeth into it, and there's a lot of nice lines you can take and a lot of good shortcuts you can take. So overall, really enjoyed this map, and I rate it quite high. At 32, we have 3DS Alpine Pass. I'd be kind of interested to gauge people's feelings on this map, because I don't really know where people view it. Like, I've seen a lot of YouTube videos, but I've not heard that many people talk about it in great detail. I really like Alpine Pass. I don't know if I'm in a minority for that, but I think it's just the theme, the idea of the map, jumping off. I think it's like, it was the first time they introduced glider, and I think they wanted to show off like how cool gliders could be, and I think they did the best job of it, to be honest. I think it really made gliding like satisfying and nice to look at, and you know, just having that build-up initial ramp, and then you see the entire mountain pass, and it looks even better on the Switch than it did on the 3DS. It's another example of the Switch doing a better rendition of the map than the original map, in my opinion. And I just think it's a whole lot of fun to race this map. I absolutely love the rock ramp at the end. It feels really, like, it gives you a bit of an adrenaline rush, you know, trying to race up the end and hoping that you don't get screwed over. You can take really long glider shortcuts at the end where you can pretty much cut like the entire bridge section. It's just a lot of fun. And I don't think I ever had a bad time on Alpine Pass. You know, I think it would be extremely unlikely that I would get irritated by this map or frustrated with it. It's just generally really, really enjoyable to race. And, you know, it's nice to see some of the 3DS tracks, because I think the 3DS mechanics of Mario Kart were a little bit tame and a little bit boring for my tastes, but the maps were great. And there's some maps that I just think should have been used and reutilized, and I like seeing them being used and reutilized from the 3DS. So, yeah, good little map. At 31, we have Melody Motorway. I think this may be one of the best, if not the best, like, concepts for a Mario Kart map, and it's just executed so darn well. It's 3DS Melody Motorway. I absolutely couldn't get enough of this map the first time I played it on the 3DS, and it's continued all the way to playing it on the Switch. It does get heavily voted a bit much for my taste. I find myself playing this map a ridiculous amount of time, but I don't blame it. Also, like I said, the concept is awesome. There's a lot of music lovers out there in the world, myself included, and I love the way, you know, this level's spin on music. It's such a refreshing course idea. And the fact that you race across the little piano keys and it makes noise for each individual one. The fact that they have that rhythm section where if you, tap our trigger at the right time, you get a trick. Love it. There's just so many great ideas packed all into one. For me, it's never going to reach, like, top 10 status, let's say, because the difficulty isn't too extreme. And I like a little bit of difficulty in my Mario Kart levels. But it is a great track. And like I said, I think concept-wise and execution of said concept, this is pretty much peak Mario Kart. And if someone was... It's the sort of map where it wouldn't be my top 5, top 10, but if someone said to me that it was theirs, I wouldn't judge them. I'd be like, yeah, it's a banger map. Like, 100% it's a banger map. Like, there's no question about it. And this is another map where it's pretty much impossible to have a bad time on this map. Like, you're usually just going to be like... If something irritating happened to you, you just be distracted by the map's theme and just be like, well, this is still a lot of fun, to be honest. So, like, oh well, who cares? So good stuff. Rounding off another decade, we've got DS Shroom Ridge at number 30. This is a map that I did not expect to like. This was kind of one of the maps that fell into the area of, I think this looks like cheap DLC. Graphically, it looks like they've picked such a simple map. They could have chosen all these, awesome Wii DS maps from the past 3DS maps, and they went with, like, DS Shroom Ridge, and it just looks so plain and so simple. And then I started playing it, and playing it, and playing it, and every time it just got better and better and more fun, and it's just a treat to race. I don't know why, I don't know what it is about it, but it's always a good time on Shroom Ridge. I love the shortcuts at the end. I love going into the motorway tunnel. Sometimes they just get the pacing and the feel and the rhythm and the, the layout of the turns. They just get it right. And Shroom Ridge just feels so memorable the way to race it, it feels so distinct and enjoyable. It's just a course that has continually grown on me over time, and, like, part of me was even making an argument to rank it higher, which, like, when you actually look at it aesthetically, like, I don't think it's one of the peak, like, aesthetic or even themed maps. Like, it almost feels kind of lazy in terms of its theming, but it's just great. It's just, like, it's just a great time, and I always have funny situations happen, like, coming out of that bridge, it just gets insane at the, not the bridge, sorry, like, the little motorway tunnel. It just always seems to get insane around that area, and then you come out, and then you try and push for the shortcut, and just shenanigans happen on an extremely irregular basis, and I think it's a great little map. It's good to experience some of these DS maps as well, because honestly, like, the DS is probably one of the versions of Mario Kart that I played the least outside of, like, Tour and SNES. I really didn't play Mario Kart DS all too much, because I didn't have friends who had a DS, so I never ended up playing it multiplayer. So getting a chance to relive some of these DS games, but on the Switch, has been a treat, and I had no, like, personal feelings towards this map at all before playing it on this, so to find out that I actually really enjoy it has been awesome. So yeah, big fan of this one. And now we move into the top 30. Feeling fine, it's number 29, Moonview Highway, another Wii classic. I've got good memories with Moonview Highway. Moonview Highway on the Wii was one of these courses where you really had to learn, like, how you were going to approach this map, because you could get beat up by cars left, right, and center. And it's a little bit similar to that on the Mario Kart 8. Probably a little bit simplified, which I don't mind, because it still races great. It looks awesome. I love the shortcut at the beginning. You can actually, like, cut over the cliff really nicely. And that part feels more streamlined in this game. And I think it just looks better in this game, Moonview Highway. Does it race better? I don't know. It's kind of a close call. I did like Moonview Highway a lot, but I also like Mario Kart 8 a lot. I think, like, the looks just do so much for it, and when you're going at blazing speeds on this map, it feels really cool because, like, it just looks so good that, like, it gives you that sense of inertia and that sense of speed because, just seeing all the scenery go past you looks a lot better in this game than it did on Mario Kart Wii. And it might be another case of, like, it's a slightly more realistic setting, and the slightly more realistic settings Mario Kart 8 thrives in visually, I think, over the more, like, arcadey levels. But yeah, really good. I'm super glad that they remade this one. To be honest, since the start of the DLCs, I was always gagging for Wii remakes. I'm a bit of a Wii fanboy, as you can probably tell by this stage in the video. So getting Moonview Highway was a bit of a treat. And I've had a lot of fun with it so far. And, you know, I like the... Apparently they randomized the boosters, the end portion of the map, which is an interesting take on it as well. It kind of keeps it fresh, keeps a bit of variety, similar to how they did with Excitebike, except it doesn't suck like Excitebike Arena. So, yeah, nice little map. Another Wii course coming in hot, number 38. It's Grumble Volcano off the Wii. Grumble Volcano was a bit of a menace in Mario Kart Wii to the lesser experienced players, you know, especially if you were racing a heavyweight like Funky Kong on his, whatchamacallit, Bowser bike, or his, what do they call it, the Flame Runner. If you were racing one of the faster races on Mario Kart Wii, it could get chaotic, it could get messy. It's a little bit tricky on this game, especially, I'm sure, for newer players. And I really like it. I really like it aesthetically. I've always been a fan of Grumble Volcano. Never been in the upper echelons for me of Mario Kart maps, but was always one of the better difficult tracks. Obviously, you lose a lot of the shortcuts off the Wii version, like the rock hops and the double shortcut, etc. Which is a shame, because the shortcuts were a huge part of the identity of this map. So that probably keeps it from being a little bit higher. You know, it would have been nice if they replaced it with some other shortcuts and found its way in. But nonetheless, there's not too many Bowser's Castles in Mario Kart 8, and I feel like this kind of takes the place of a Bowser's Castle, in a sense. Sort of adds to that lava aesthetic. And definitely, like, you know, crazy times can happen on this map. Crazy scenarios, and, you know, it always keeps you on your toes, Grumble Volcano, and I appreciate that. Good little map. At number 27, we've got another tour map coming in. It's Los Angeles Laps. And we're probably going up a tier again in terms of the standards here on the tier list. I feel like this is where the heavy hitters start coming in, rolling in. I love Los Angeles Laps. You know, I think this is another map that does one of the better jobs of exemplifying what is cool about Los Angeles. You know, it really, you know, if you've watched a lot of YouTube videos, there's a lot of YouTube videos where people will do, like, content in LA, like IRL content, and it's sort of, I think this does a really, really good job of, like, capturing the best aspects of what you might imagine seeing over there. And personally, I just feel like it's a really, really great time. You know, it's kind of got those, like, tropical sort of palm trees, the beach location. It's like a summertime vibes to the absolute max. And there's not actually that many tracks in Mario Kart 8 that sort of have that summertime feel to it. And especially pulling it off so well. Definitely a treat for me. Love the skate parks as well. The only part of the stage I probably don't like that much is like the construction zone. That feels a little bit random. I'm assuming, I don't know too much about LA, but I'm assuming there's a lot of construction that goes on in LA. I'm not really sure. Or maybe it's referencing something specific, but other than that, you know, it feels like a kind of ugly throwaway part of the map. But in general, the map just is a treat to go through, and definitely I feel like if you were racing it in summer and it was hot, you just like, it would just be immaculate vibes, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, I couldn't see myself putting this any lower. Really enjoyable track. At number 26, we have Merry Mountain. Now, this map absolutely baits. It's Christmas bait to the absolute max, and I'm a Christmas lover. It's definitely my favorite season, my favorite holiday. I love Christmas, and this is happy holidays all over. Just the race up to the mountain, the aesthetic. Yeah, it completely, like, there's been other maps where, like, the vibes and the theme and the course, like, haven't been able to carry it that far. I feel like this gets pretty heavy carried by the theme. But it is also fun to race on. I think the only issue with it is the hill is a little bit simplistic to come down on. But it still looks amazing, and it still feels fun to race down. And the runaway Christmas trains, you know, like the sleighs of Santa and stuff like that, they're so cool to see. And, like, if you're a sucker for Christmas aesthetic like I am, I can't see how you wouldn't absolutely love this map. It's probably the best, like, winter/Christmas themed racetrack map from, like, any game. And I've played a fair amount of race games, not even just Mario Kart, but, you know, stuff like Diddy Kong Racing, stuff like Sonic Advanced, you know, Sonic Racing All-Stars Transformed, yada yada, the list goes on. But this is pretty peak Christmas design, and it just looks amazing. It looks like something that like Illumination Studios would put together on when they're on their A game. You know what I'm saying? And something like it's a level of quality that only in a video game that only Nintendo can really reach. And I absolutely love it. At number 25, we have SNES Bowser Castle 3. Like I said, not too many Bowser's Castles in Mario Kart 8, so always a treat. You know, it was great to see this when we saw it as part of the final DLC. And there's just thematically and aesthetically some stuff they've done in this map, which I haven't seen before, which I absolutely love. The main portion of that being the little lava walls, the side walls that you go through at the beginning of the course. Just looks absolutely epic. It's got a bit of that Grumble Volcano appeal, but I feel like it does a better job of that. Just aesthetically, it's just absolutely dripping with atmosphere and dread. And actually, just in terms of like the way you race it, it's really fun, simple, effective, and good at almost everything it does. One thing I do wish is that you could cut better across the... Because it's sort of almost... You get to this turn towards the end of the race where it looks like you should be able to jump off this little side cliff. And it looks like there should be a shortcut there, and it doesn't count as a shortcut. It puts you out of bounds, like, pretty much for anything you do. Which I think is a little bit tight. That would, like, push it up a little bit more. Because I think, like, the shortcut variance on this map isn't particularly great. There's a couple, like, you know, cutting off road and stuff like that. But... overall, I wish they kind of did more with the shortcuts, but as a track, it's amazing. It's always a good time, and it's just the right sort of length for a fun Mario Kart track. Doesn't outstay its welcome. Very enjoyable, and yeah, I always have a great time on this one. Number 24, we have Ninja Hideaway, which came in the late stage Wii U DLC. This map, for me, is just... Well, to be fair, first things first, I mess up on this map more than I probably do on any other map. This is just one of these maps where there's just a lot of different routes to take and a lot of different decisions to make, and it can just lend to more errors happening, and I definitely lend myself to more errors. But nonetheless, the theming, the execution of said theme is some of the best in the series. It really reminds me of that Mario Odyssey level where you go through the Ninja Castle. Just something like I super didn't expect from a Mario Kart game, and I was super thankful for when they did put it in. I love that the Shy Guys act like little ninjas with their sword. And to be honest, it maybe even could have gone higher if I wasn't just salty by how many piss poor performances I have had on this map. I do like the little smoke vents that lift you up to alternate routes. I like that you've got the decision on the first lap of the 3 different routes you can take, and some of them feel a bit more risky. Some of them feel a bit more safer, but you obviously sacrifice speed. And I also think it uses some of the best glider routes in the series, where, you know, you get the choice to try and push up higher or go lower, and again, you get that selection process. There's so much selection that it almost feels like a choose-your-own-adventure storybook at the beginning of a race, which I think is really cool. Not that many maps in Mario Kart explore that, where there's, like, alternate branching paths. And I think it does a really good job of, you know, giving the player choice and making the player feel like they have an effect on the map, which I always like in Mario Kart. You don't just want to be coasting through the course on autopilot. You want to actually make some informed decisions, and it gives you more reasons to keep coming back to the map and learning the map and discovering which routes will be the fastest for you. So, definitely an easy 24. At number 23, we have Waluigi Pinball. For some people, I could have imagined them putting this in their top 10. You know, just the pinball theming has always been really popular. People love Mario Kart DS, and this was one of the standout maps on it. So I understand people's enthusiasm for it. For me, it's just never been a map that's been my all-time favorite. I don't know why. I think it's just because, like, the actual layout in terms of from a racing perspective is quite simple. You just sort of race down to the bottom on a slope. I love the way it looks. I've always loved, like, casino-esque or slot machine-esque aesthetics. One of the aesthetics I used to love was in Sonic Heroes when they had the Casino Zone level, and in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 as well. Sega have always done casino sort of style levels amazingly well. That's one of the standouts of them. And don't get me wrong, I love the way it looks, and I think this is a really, really good adaptation of it as well. Like, the pinballs look maybe the best they've looked in this map, and the speeds that they actually pick up at the end. You know, I say that some courses in Mario Kart 8 have a tendency to lean towards a little bit too easy, but in this race, like, the likelihood of you getting a hit by a pinball is really, really high. They go extremely fast, and I absolutely love the warp tunnel at the beginning. Probably just doesn't have, like, the difficulty and the variety to make it, like, a top 10 course for me, personally. But it's obviously still a great course. I'll mostly always vote it when I see it come up, and I always seem to have a good time on it, so nothing against it whatsoever. At number 22, we have DS Peach Gardens, another DS track coming in. For me, this doesn't rank quite up to the high levels, I think, of Wii Peach Gardens. Wii Peach Gardens is actually kind of a sleeper pick for one of my favorite Mario Kart tracks. I love some of the inside shortcuts that you can take on it. You know, there's a lot of grass cuts you can make, a lot of early turning decisions you can make. When I first started playing Mario Kart Wii originally, I really didn't vibe with Peach Gardens at all. I just thought it was a bit pointless, and a bit too pleasant for my liking and simple, but actually, when you get into it, you can get really nice lines on this track. One thing I will say that it does have for it is I do like the gimmick where you race backwards on the final lap. It does mix it up quite nicely, and, you know, if Peach Gardens did have a problem of being a bit simple or a bit repetitive, then having the last lap go backwards is a nice way of changing up the pace and mixing it up. And it does just look gorgeous on the Switch. To be fair, you know, it's a track that they really faithfully did a faithful rendition of, but it also, you know, is graphically raised up a little bit, that bar. So I do enjoy it, always have a good time on Peach Gardens. The shortcut at the end when you're going backwards is absolutely insane. Like, you literally need a boost for that grass cut towards the end of that third lap, because if you don't, like, you can literally drop like 6 places, or you can gain like 6 places if you have the boost. So that's always really fun. Super entertaining map. I've always been a fan of Peach Gardens. I think people kind of sleep on it a little bit because it's a great little map. At number 21, we have Sky High Sunday. I absolutely love this course. I think, I do hear some people in a couple YouTube videos, couple videos online, talking that it's not one of their favorite tracks, or they're a bit annoyed when they see Sky High Sunday. I absolutely love this track. I'm a bit of a sucker for food-themed courses, to be fair, and I think this is one of the best that did it. You know, Sweet Sweet Mountain, or Sweet Sweet, I can't remember the name of it, but that track that I put fairly low on this list, you know, for me, that's an example of a food course done wrong, and this is an example of a food course done right. Like, everything just looks so colourful, so bright, so tasty, and there's so much variety. I love the little chocolate wafers that you ride upon. I love the little branching paths in the middle section where you can go on the lower end. They've got, like, Pop-Tarts, ice cream. Everything just looks so good. It does a great job of, like, making American sweet food and bringing it to life and making it look so vibrant and delectable. In terms of the actual layout racing course, it can get a little bit simple sometimes. But I think there's always something good to look at no matter where you're racing from. So I always think that makes it, like, you know, that keeps it fresh and it keeps it exciting, because there's always a good horizon in front of you and always something good and something interesting to point out. Even the backgrounds look amazing. Just all in all, like, I'm always happy when Sky High Sunday comes. And another thing I'll say about the racing is that I love the glider section on this map. I love how much you can cut using the glider, and I quite like the booster railings as well. It's a little bit different from where you've got those, like, cylindrical booster panels. Like, on this one, you've actually got something that you can hit, which is a banister that fits into the actual map, and you can kind of keep inside of it. Just all in all, I'm always happy when this comes up, and definitely one of my standouts. Rounding off another decade, we've got number 20, 3DS Rainbow Road. It kind of breaks my heart to not put this a bit higher, because I do think this may be the best looking track in Mario Kart 8. Definitely, like, top 3. It looks absolutely awesome, and as I've mentioned earlier in the video, I am a sucker for Rainbow Roads. And to be honest, when I first played this on the 3DS, I couldn't believe how cool this track was. The fact that you actually got a race, you know, drop on top of a planet, drop on top of the moon, and actually ride alongside the back of it. Just aesthetically, this is up there with one of the best ideas they've had, and having each lap be its own separate part of the course, and it's just this massive overarching space adventure, I suppose. It's just such a cool concept and such a refreshing concept for a Rainbow Road map, and it definitely mixed it up in a way that I didn't expect, but I also really, really enjoyed. I will say, for whatever reason, the difficulty and the turns, they just felt a bit more interesting on the 3DS version in my memory. And on this, it can feel a little bit like you coast on cruise control in certain bits. Like, the boosts kind of give the illusion that you're going super fast and that you're going to be doing stuff, but unless you're on 200cc, there are a lot of straight sections on this map. So just in terms of the actual layout of the race, that's the only reason that this doesn't rank a bit higher. I do like difficulty in my courses, and for me, this one, you can kind of turn on the autopilot and just kind of coast through. I think the section with the booster pads, where you go inside of the cylinder, and you have the tricks at the end, that's probably where it picks up the most in difficulty and interest, and there's definitely some cool shortcuts you can see, glider shortcuts. If you look online, like, there's some really cool ways you can approach it, especially on 200cc. But the final turn feels a little bit underwhelming for me, and I kind of wish they capped it off in a more interesting way. Nonetheless, you know, I'm just over-criticizing it. It is still a great map, and definitely one that I was happy to see in Mario Kart 8. We're definitely bumping up a tier as we go into number 19. This is probably like the A-tier section of maps. This is Waluigi Stadium. You know, everyone who's grown up with the GameCube version of the game, the Wii version of the game, and now the Mario Kart 8 version, Waluigi Stadium is just an absolute classic. It's my favorite, like, stadium-style map, like Waluigi Wario-style map. I literally can't get enough of this one. I do like some of the changes they made with the metal over railings. I thought that was a cool idea. I think you lose a bit of the appeal for me from the Wii version, just with, like, in terms of the shortcuts. I loved the Wii shortcuts where you could take the booster panel inside and then sort of it cuts down your jump and you take it inside and go super quick. I think also the Piranhas, they eased up a bit on the way that the Piranhas work. The Piranhas used to absolutely screw you over in the Wii version of the game. They've definitely died that down a little bit. I can understand why, because they were pretty frustrating to lose to. But nonetheless, aesthetically, it's probably the best version of the map. I love the sheen of the mud. You know, what I was saying earlier about, like, some tracks have this dirt aesthetic and the dirt just gets quite repetitive because you see it across so many tracks. I think they do a great job because this looks like it's, you know, this glossy type of mud. It's not a type of mud that you've seen on any other tracks, really, and it makes it stand out, and it makes Waluigi Stadium in this game have its own visual, distinct appeal and flair. And it's just a track I could keep coming back to. I could definitely, like, race this till the end of the time. I love the way it flows throughout the map. I love the difficulty. The turns at the end are just a great way to cap it off, and the jump at the end is a great way to cap it off. And in general, you know, I could never say bad words about Waluigi Stadium. Wii version is still probably my favorite, but it's still a great version. I probably prefer it to the GameCube version, and I like it a lot. At number 18, we have Sydney Sprint. This was when the tour tracks really started picking up for me. Sydney Sprint is just an absolute delight to race through. Seeing the Sydney Opera House. Again, what I was saying earlier about, like, how they seem to pick and choose, like, some regions getting such a good deal in terms of, like, how entertaining they are to race and how fun they are to play. Sydney Sprint just seems to come out of nowhere with an absolute banger track for me. I always have a joy racing through this track. I think it's got the right amount of difficulty, the right amount of you know, fun aesthetic to it, and it's just overall, it's just one that I'm always happy when it gets voted, and I sometimes, like, forget about how good it is before I race it again. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot, Sydney Sprint is, like, literally one of the best tracks in this game, like, hands down. You know, just every aspect of it is enjoyable. I think it's got a good amount of shortcuts, grass cuts, and they're quite, you know, they're one of these grass cuts that are, like, obvious to take, but they're still, you know, they still reward you a lot, and there's still a lot of them. So, you know, choosing when to save your boosts for and choosing when to hold your resources for is a really good time. I also love the ramp section with the tricking. Just everything about it is a really good time. It uses the glider really well, and I like the way that it finishes off. The tour tracks, they definitely have some really good ones and some not so good ones, but this falls firmly into the category of one of the better ones, so yeah. At number 17, we have Wii Mushroom Gorge. Now, you might have seen some of the tracks that I've rated in this video and thought, oh, you know, he's going to rate the Wii version of the track higher than the remake of it, like, all the time, and he's biased towards the Wii. Don't get me wrong, there probably is some bias to the Wii, but this is one of the examples where I actually think the Mario Kart 8 version of Mushroom Gorge knocks the Wii version out of the park. And I personally didn't even really like Mushroom Gorge that much on the Wii. I just found the bouncing mushroom section a little bit repetitive, a little bit unenjoyable, but the way they've aesthetically mixed it up here with the cavern having these, you know, vivid, multicolored crystals, being able to use the glider section. I like that the way the shortcut, the gap cut operates in this one way better, to be honest, because it just feels more intuitive. In Mario Kart Wii, it felt a little bit like you were breaking the game whenever you tried to go for the cut in that, but in this one, it feels like it was designed to be there. And when you pull it off, it's still a little bit tricky, but it's like, you know, it's very much doable and enjoyable. And overall, I just absolutely love this track. I think again, the bounce pad section on the Wii version could just last a bit long, whereas I think you pick up a lot more speed going on them, and you're not so trapped in an animation for bounce pads. On this, so it can go a lot quicker. Plus, like, the respawn issues that the Wii version had where you would get sent back absolutely miles, it doesn't happen so much on this. And just all in all, like, this was such a pleasant surprise, because, again, when I heard about a Mushroom Gorge remake, I thought, ugh, like, I don't even like Mushroom Gorge particularly, so I wasn't, like, over the moon. I thought there were such better tracks they picked, but they really did a great job porting this one over, and it's quickly become one of my favorite tracks in the game. Coming in at number 16, we have Neo Bowser City, Koopa City, whatever you want to call it, off the 3DS. In 3DS, this was a massive hit for me from the get-go. I immediately enjoyed it and was immediately sort of captivated by it. And I remember when I play courses on a handheld, I think I mentioned earlier in this video, but I generally prefer stuff on a console. So getting to play this on the Switch finally, and play it with a Pro Controller. Definitely one of my favorite courses in the game, and kind of felt like it got a new lease of life on the Switch and the Wii U. But for me, it's definitely got some of the more complex turns in the map, and sharp turns, a lot of hairpoint turns, and on 200cc, this course can be an absolute nightmare. You have to really take it carefully, and generally want like a light or medium weight vehicle to even get through this successfully. But it's a good course. I love the cyberpunk aesthetic. I love the futuristic aesthetic. Some of my favorite, and it kind of is something you'd more expect in an F-Zero game than a Mario Kart game. It's not atypical for a Mario Kart style level, and I like that. It really sets it apart. You know, there's no course really like Koopa City in the game, and as a result, I feel like it's really carved out its own place in the Mario Kart meta, and yeah, definitely a big fan of this one. At number 15, we have yet another Mario Kart Tour track. We have Athens Dash. I absolutely love almost everything about this level. If you guys didn't know, I actually did Ancient History as a course at Sixth Form College, which is A-levels. It's kind of like higher education in the UK. I absolutely can't get enough of this sort of aesthetic. I don't know why, it's always resonated with me quite a bit. And definitely just the way that you're, you know, going across the ruins, the different laps on this map, the different portions of the map, climbing up Mount Olympus towards the end. Just absolutely, really have a terrific time on this map almost all the time. Definitely think it's got some great shortcuts, some great moments, a great glider section. It's just got pretty much everything. You know, it kind of highlights all the best mechanics off of Mario Kart 8, other than having like an underwater section. But yeah, it's always a really good time. One of my favorite moments, to be honest, is like the jumping section right near the end of the lap. I feel like it's a great way to cap off the map, and it feels really competitive as you're sort of racing towards the end and you're choosing your trick section. I think that was a really clever idea. And just in general, yeah, nothing really bad to say about this map. Just, this is definitely the peak of what a tour map can look like. And it's maps like this that make me glad that they put Mario Kart Tour maps into the game. Definitely, you know, although it has its fair share of controversies, I would say, with some of the lesser tour maps coming in, and some people not being a fan of them, I think maps like this make it a standout and make the DLC feel worthwhile. And, you know, it would have been a shame if they just stayed in tour on a mobile game. You know, a mobile game isn't going to be my favourite. And, to be honest, I think they could just sit there. You know, if they wanted to use Mario Kart 8 as, like, a platform to just keep putting maps in, they'd have so much to choose from Mario Kart Tour. And I really don't feel like they do a disservice here. So, great map at number 15. At number 14, we've got Daisy Cruiser. I think it's a testament to how many good maps are in this game that this would make it to number 14, because, you know, in Double Dash, this was a standout track, and I think it is an amazing track all around. But there's just a couple that rank above it. But definitely absolutely gorgeous map in this game, one of the best looking maps. And Daisy Cruiser, you know, it being omitted on the Wii was always a bit of a shame for me, because I thought, like, it was a great track to bring forward. So having it back on the Switch has just been a joy, and I love the underwater section in this map, and it's definitely carried by its visuals. I don't think the layout is anything insane, but having the music and the vibes and the aesthetic, it's just all enough to make it a standout track. And I feel like it really fits in and slots in nicely with, like, Mario Kart 8's feel-good aesthetic. I always say Mario Kart 8 feels like a summertime Mario Kart. Feels like something maybe a little bit more casual than your Mario Kart Wii, but something you would just bust out in front of a TV of 4. It's a hot day, drinking a bit of alcohol or something like that. I feel like that is when it's in its prime, and this map just completely fits that feeling. And, you know, definitely getting it so late into the DLC cycle was an absolute treat. And yeah, I just couldn't be happier with this one, really. They did a perfect job on the remake, and the little Goombas in their little floaties are some of the cutest things ever. And I just have a good time with this one, for sure. At number 13, it is Cheep Cheep Beach from the DS. This was definitely a bit of a surprise for me, how much I enjoyed it, and especially when the game first came out, I didn't really think much of it, and it just kept growing and growing on me, until I was like, you know what, this is definitely amongst some of my favourite tracks, and I almost put it even higher on this list, but I started shuffling things around and thought, yeah, okay, it's good, but let's not, like, go crazy on this one. But I think one of the reasons it stands out is there's not that many beach time maps on this game. There's no Koopa Troopa Beach remake. There's no, Daisy, which one's it called? Peach Beach on this game. And this is just such a gorgeous beach map. And it's definitely so much better. I think one of the reasons I might not have liked it as well is because I thought it was going to be a bit like Shy Guy Beach off of the GameCube, off of the Wii, which was one of my least favorite tracks on that game, because the crabs were just irritating and the racing experience was kind of tedious. This one is just awesome. I love it. I do miss the fact there used to be a shortcut, or at least on the Wii, there's a Wii, like, custom version of this map that has a shortcut through the mud. I don't know if the DS version has it. So I do miss that shortcut being in it. I think that would have gone great in this, but cutting the off-road in the underwater section is one of the better looking underwater sections, and the end of the map just turns into an absolute clusterfudge on the hairpin turn, and you get some, like, bananas moments on this map. And like I said, I think it is just the standout beach map on this game, and I love the way it looks. The bright sun, the, you know, vivid blue waters. You know, Nintendo do such a good job of bringing water sections to life across so many of their games. I don't know what it is they do, but they've definitely got the knack of making clear blue oceans and clear blue skies look extra great. So yeah, big standout map for me. Coming in at number 12, as I mentioned previously, we've got another tour track, and it's an ancient history, which, like I said, I love ancient history. I think it's awesome to go back to these historical landmarks and historical land pieces, and they definitely have a lot of that in the Rome map, which makes sense. I mean, if you go to Rome in person, there's so much, like, you know, the Colosseums, of the historical, like, temples and bathhouses, etc., etc. And you get a lot of that on this map. And what I love the most, again, is what I mentioned previously as well, is them combining like Mario elements with this game. I think they do some of the best of that in this course, where you've got the chain chomps that are crashing through the Colosseum area, and you've also got the little fuzzy bad guys from Super Mario World. I don't know what they're called, but they're awesome, and it's been a while since I've seen them utilized. You know, in Mario World, they were all over the place on a couple levels, but I don't really see them too commonly in modern-day Mario stuff. So, to have so many references to, you know, old Mario things, but also being faithful to, you know, a lot of the architecture, stylization of Italy, it's just a treat to race through. I think it's also like this time of night you don't see too commonly. It's almost similar to how Moonview Highway is lit up. Looks really incredible. And yeah, there's not really a portion of the track that I dislike racing through. And I don't think it has that Mario Kart Tour confusion where you get a bit stuck about landmarks or a bit stuck about levels. I think it all flows through itself very, very seamlessly. And from the beginning, you know, from the get-go, I feel like you kind of know what the level's going to be, and it remains faithful to that overall Rome theming. And it's just a great time. You know, I really recommend racing through this one if you haven't, and giving it a fair try, because it's one of the standout tour tracks for sure. Just narrowly missing out on a top 10 spot, we have Coconut Mall from the Nintendo Wii. This was a treat to get put into the map. You know, I've got a lot of nostalgia, of course, for Coconut Mall. It's got one of the best soundtracks. It's definitely a meme. It's become a meme online just from how iconic and how good its soundtrack is. And it is just a great time. And to be honest, I think the Mario Kart 8 rendition of Coconut Mall is better and preferred to the Mario Kart Wii version. Because on Mario Kart 8, they've definitely done a better job with the escalators, in my opinion. The escalators were just a bit of a nuisance. You couldn't really make out on your TV screen. I remember back in the day when, if you played this on like a CRT or a 480 TV on the Wii, the escalators would sort of blend in together and they'd look a bit muddy on the textures. On this one, it just makes a whole lot more sense, and you can race along the arches of the escalators as well. And then they also fixed the issue with the cars. You know, when this map originally released, there was a bit of controversy because everyone said the cars were so much easier than the Wii counterpart. So they changed that around, and I think that was a great idea too. I think the cars are just the right level of difficulty. They're not like overly frustrating or, you know, ridiculous to avoid, but they can catch you and trip you up. And then, again, the last point really is just that it fits the Mario Kart 8 aesthetic. What I said about, like, summertime, happy vibes. I think this course just has that all over. And it's overall a super, super solid track. Only reason it probably misses out on top 10, again, is because, like, I like a bit of the difficulty, and I like a bit of the challenge, and I like a bit of the variety that comes with that sort of thing. But it is a great track, and I was super happy to see this come back. Scraping it onto our top 10 of our list, we have Tick-Tock Clock at number 10. Ever since I played Tick-Tock Clock on Mario 64, I was always a huge fan of the clockwork aesthetic. There's something very, like, entrancing and hypnotic about the inner workings of a clock, and for them to, like, base a Mario Kart level around it was just a genius idea. It's got some of the more enjoyable shortcuts to race on this game, and I do also feel like the Mario Kart 8 version, for me personally, is a upgraded version of the Nintendo DS Tick-Tock Clock. You know, on the Tick-Tock Clock, parts of it looked a little bit ugly, to be honest, in my opinion, and I think they've just, like, really neatened up the presentation here, and it just looks incredible to race through, and I think it also has a great job of marrying both a very good presentation with an enjoyable racing style, just the right amount of difficulty sprinkled in, really satisfying shortcuts to pull off, and it's an incredibly highly voted track in Mario Kart 8, and I think for good reason. Super fun to race through this one. Nice glider section. And I love the fact that the whole track feels like it's got a rhythm and a beat going through it, you know, to the tune of a clock, you know. Just an enjoyable track all around. And easily makes my top 10 of the list. Could have even made higher, to be honest, but it's definitely up there. At number 9, we have got Yoshi Circuit. Yoshi Circuit is just a standout GameCube classic for me. It's so funny that it's in the shape of Yoshi, and it just happens to feel like it was built to race for fun. Got one of my favorite shortcuts, taking the tunnel shortcut on this map, and I love taking the grass cut and the initial waterfall shortcut. Definitely some of my, like, peak shortcuts in Mario Kart 8. And just in general, like, just seeing this in this game, it's probably my favorite iteration of it, and it's always a super fun time. You know, I just can't really... It's got the right vibe to it, it's got the right aesthetic to it, and it feels like a good time to race, and it's short but sweet. And sometimes that's just what you need from a Mario Kart track, you know, it's just always guaranteeing a really, really fun time. And something about the layout of the course and the length of the course really lends to that. You know, it's so rare that I have a Yoshi circuit experience that isn't an interesting time, you know? I always have ones, whether for good or for worse. You know, sometimes it spins either way, but definitely love this course and easily earns its way onto the top 10 as a bit of a banger course. At number 8, we have DK's Snowboard Cross. This was definitely one of my standout maps on Mario Kart Wii, and I didn't know if they were going to do it as faithfully. I didn't know if they were going to keep the single cut and the double cut, especially not the double cut shortcuts on this map, and you know what? I think they just hit this one out of the park. It's a home run for sure. I actually ummed and ahed about, like, I put this at an initial placing of kind of like late 10s, and then I was like going through the list and I was like watching the gameplay back and I was like, what am I on about? Like, this map is so fun. Absolutely love the idea of it. The shortcuts feel really satisfying on this way. They feel like they were built to be there. They really got the dimensions right on this one, and I actually think the ending section with the Shy Guys feels a little bit more natural on this game compared to how it felt on the Wii. But the soundtrack's also one of the best in the game to do it. I remember one night I was sat with my girlfriend and I like just played her the DK Snowboard Cross song at random, or I was just listening to random Nintendo songs, and she was just like, keep that on, that's such a good song, like, how have I not heard this before? And I was like, yeah, I know, it's a banger. I didn't even like consider the level of banger that it was at that point. But yeah, I mean, this was one that when they were announcing DLC, I really hoped that they would put into the game, because it is one of my all-time favorite Mario Kart tracks. And just to see this remade so faithfully in the Mario Kart 8 game is just an absolute treat. And definitely, you know, by the time this came out and a couple of other maps came out, I knew that I'd gotten my money's worth in the Mario Kart, you know, DLC booster course pack, for sure. At number 7, we have Hyrule Circuit of the Triforce Cup. Absolute treat to have a Zelda level in a Mario Kart game, and I completely hope this is something they explore in the future, because Zelda is just such a, you know, it's one of my all-time favorite series, and I think they just take so many of the better aspects from Zelda games, and having the rupees, the shortcut. The funny thing is about the shortcut on this level with the water fountain, where you unlock it by hitting the various boost panels, is that I didn't realize that that shortcut existed for like a disturbing amount of time. And it was almost like I had like figured out the puzzle. I just thought, oh yeah, it's cool that they've got boosters, but I don't know why the water fountain doesn't unlock for a while. And then like one day I just clicked and I just felt like the biggest idiot on the planet. But the shortcut to the end of the map as well, real treat, doesn't outstay its welcome, and just having a Zelda level, you know, some people, they feel like they don't want the waters muddied when it comes to, like, Nintendo games and having tracks from different series in it, and, you know, it's supposed to be Mario Kart, but I feel like I really don't care at all, and it's definitely a way to, like, freshen up the series and add new stuff. Because there does become a point with Mario Kart when it's like, well, they're just going to add gimmicks to make it feel interesting. You know, for me, anti-gravity felt like a little bit of a gimmick. It felt a little bit tacked on, where I didn't necessarily need it, but it was fine, you know. But with stuff like these other series games coming in, they just seem to slot in so well, and it's the same appeal as, like, Smash Bros, where just seeing all the different characters and all these different aesthetics is such a treat, and this course is just, like, always a guaranteed good time for me, Hyrule Circuit. I absolutely love it. Coming in at number 6, it's our highest ranking Mario Kart Tour track. I've got Singapore Speedway. This track is just such a delight to look at. Like, I'm a bit of a sucker for those sort of cityscape, bright light, neon lights, and they just absolutely nail it on this one. And then combining that with the music, which is some of the best music, easily the best Mario Kart Tour track, soundtrack for me. And I absolutely can't get enough of this map. Pretty much every single part, when you land in the water pool, when you take the glider section towards the end and go through the rings, it's just got so many satisfying elements of it. And the way they combine the music with the track, with the vibes, because the music seems to almost like go in tandem with the way that the races play out. It almost feels like you're racing to the music somehow, because it just has such a good build-up and such a good, satisfying conclusion to the music. I absolutely can't get enough of this track. Every time it comes up, I vote it, and I get super frustrated when people don't vote it, because it's like it isn't one of the, again, I think it comes back to that, like, tour problem where people don't want to vote tour tracks a lot of the time. This track is always a good time, like, always, 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 and I think it's super underrated. I don't know if it's underrated, but it's just from judging from how people vote on it, I think it's underrated. I think it's, like, an incredible time, and is 100% the standout tour track for me, which is funny because I know literally nothing about Singapore. I have no connection to Singapore. I've never met someone from Singapore. I just don't know anything about Singapore. And yeah, its tour track is one of my favorites, period. So yeah, absolutely love this one. At number 5, we've got DK Jungle. And we're now getting into the tier where it's like SS tier, where any of these maps could be a favorite Mario Kart map in like another Mario Kart game, I feel like. But it's just that Mario Kart 8 has so many standouts that, I had to pick amongst the best of the best. But this one is just always a treat to race. Absolutely love the shortcuts, love riding up the dirt track, and taking that, like, internal, inside shortcut towards the beginning where you go over the ramp. I love the jumps in towards the temple, and then going into the temple, coming out with a glider aesthetic, and then also just, like, the nods to Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii. That game is just incredible, and Tropical Freeze as well. Just seeing, like, the aesthetics carried over, and, being a giant Donkey Kong fan myself, it's just lovely, and it's not like it's too hammed up, or it's not like it's carried by the fact that it is from those games. It's just a great track to race anyway. If you put any aesthetic on this, it'll be incredible, but then you add in the fact that it is from Donkey Kong Returns. It just looks awesome. Definitely, like, this map, like, 100% grew on me. Again, I thought it was good to decent on the 3DS, but once I started playing it on the Switch and seeing it in these graphics, and racing it time and time again, just an absolute standout track from start to finish. The shortcuts are some of the funnest in the game to pull off, and I just really, really enjoy it. For me, it's a 10 out of 10 track, and I absolutely adore it. At a respectable number 4, we have Squeaky Clean Sprint. This map, there was sort of some discussion in the community of, like, porting tracks from Mario Kart Tour, porting tracks from Mario Kart, previous Mario Karts. And there was some discussion going on about, like, will they be a little bit more creative and put a little bit more effort into creating, like, tracks from scratch. And I feel like the Mario Kart DLC team really flexed their abilities with this map in just saying, oh, you want a unique, original track that will be one of the better Mario Kart tracks you've ever played, period. Here's Squeaky Clean Sprint. And the second I saw the trailers for this one, I wanted to get my hands on it immediately. I was like, I know this map is going to be a banger slammer. And it was probably even better than I expected or anticipated. It kind of has a Ninja Hideaway vibe, where you've got these glider sections where you can get to upper sections. The shortcuts are just super satisfying. I love going across the little sponge shortcut at the beginning. One of the better underwater sections. And I love the whole, your miniature in again, going back to what I said about, like, that old Micro Machines game. Just being a little miniature cart in this gigantic human world, very Toy Story feeling. And I literally can't get enough of it. I love the color palettes. I love the fact that it feels like a real American-style bathroom. And, it's just, I've never had a bad time on this map, to be quite honest. Music's great, too. The little fountain spouting out from the toilet, the shortcuts going up or out on the last laps. honestly, couldn't ask for more from this map. And like I said, I think they just they kind of just showed what they were capable of with this DLC map. And you know, it made it so that the standout maps weren't just like DLC's remakes that you expected or ported over maps. They actually went all out on this one, and fair play to Nintendo on it. It's a great map. Number 3, we have GCN DK Mountain, also found on the Nintendo Wii. This track is just a joy to race at all times, and I was so happy. I know it's been recycled quite a few times, and I know we've seen GCN DK Mountain as long as we can remember. You've probably played it a million times on the GameCube, a million times on the Wii. But you know what? It's a great track, and it doesn't get old. And I absolutely love this remake of it too. I think the shortcuts are some of the funnest. They feel like the most accessible and the most like they were meant to work on this track. And for them not to abandon the little cuts across the mountains was one of the better ideas I've had. And I think the race down the mountain, the view of the mountain, the horizon is the best it's ever been. And I think this is the best rendition of DK Mountain that there has been. So happy with what they did here. I think it looks incredible, and like I said, I'm a bit of a DK fanboy, so seeing good DK tracks is always a pleasant surprise. And yeah, I mean, the little shortcut that they added on top of the mountain as well, where you can cut across the top bit, is a nice surprise too. They didn't change too much in a negative way, but they changed things in a little bit of a positive way, I think. And it still kept the heart of the track very much intact. So yeah, overall, another 10 out of 10 map. Really, really happy they did this one, and it's a banger. At number 2, we have Rainbow Road, and it was real close between number 2 and number 1. Rainbow Road is just completely lodged a place in my heart forever. I have so many good memories off of Wii Rainbow Road. Maybe the one thing that I would say stops it from being a clear number 1 is the difficulty isn't quite as hard. I mean, this used to be a map where people would just fall off every 2 seconds. Like, Wii Rainbow Road was one of the classic difficult tracks on the game, and it definitely feels like the track's a bit wider, a bit harder to fall off, and a bit less speedy with the base mechanics of Mario Kart 8. However, that's not me shitting on it, because visually, it's an upgrade, the soundtrack is an upgrade, and the shortcut, the fact that they kept in a cut and you can do shortcuts on this map is incredible. I love this map. Like, I have so much fun on it, and they even have a new shortcut on the boosters where you can take it really, really inside when you go through the, like, star rings. Love that about the map. And they just had to bring this back, you know. This for me is the peak Rainbow Road. Has always been, you know, my ranking is probably somewhere like Wii Rainbow Road, then maybe DS/3DS Rainbow Road, then maybe GameCube, but Wii Rainbow Road has always been like the standout for me. It just combines the best elements of, you know, the vibes of Rainbow Road whilst also having a difficult layout. And this was a track that used to break people on the Nintendo Wii, and I just have so many fond memories of just, like, people coming around my house, and, like, they think they were getting better at the game, and then Wii Rainbow Road would just bring them to their knees and crush them, and you see people, like, falling behind in 12th place, falling off, like, 6 times. So funny. I do think it's a little bit lost with it. I think it would, again, be clear number 1 if they kept a bit of the difficulty, because difficulty was one of the funniest aspects of it, but still a great map. And still challenging to race really well. Like, you know, it's very skillful to race this map super, super well, I think, and to take the shortcuts effectively and efficiently. So, it's still a banger map, by all means. Love it. And finally, at number 1, this is, drumroll please, Yoshi's Island. Now, if you stayed with me till this point in the video, I'm impressed. We're genuinely, like, reaching the 3-hour mark here. But Yoshi's Island, what I said earlier about squeaky clean sprint and them flexing their creativity and the map designing skills that they have, Yoshi's Island is just bliss to race through. I love everything about it. I can't believe they decided to take something from Yoshi's Island on the SNES, which is just such a random game for them to pull from. You know, it's not even my personal favorite, like, classic Nintendo game. But the elements that I do like about Yoshi's Island, they took it to, you know, they bumped it up to 11. If people ever wanted, like, a remake of that game with, a, you know, like a HD sequel, let's say, this is probably the closest they were ever going to get to seeing, you know, the great aspects of that map reinvented. And then it's got one of my all-time favorite shortcuts with taking the random question mark cloud, and then that creating a sky bridge for you to go across. The soundtrack, the sounds, everything about this map, the Shy Guys on the shoes, the underground cave section. There isn't really a part of the map where they're not just firing on all cylinders. 10 out of 10. The backdrops, the racing, the shortcuts, everything about it. They really, really nailed this map. And again, I think just what was such a delightful joy about seeing this map is that I just didn't see it coming in a million years. Of all the Nintendo games they could have looked back on and been like, let's go remake this, let's go take something inspired of this. I don't think anyone had this on their bingo card for the Booster Track Pass, and it just makes it so much more exciting as a result. You know, when you get that Christmas present that you weren't expecting. You know, you look under the tree and you thought, I didn't know this, but this is amazing. You know, I didn't even know I was going to like this. For sure, a great way to cap off the list, and I feel like it just... This showed what Mario Kart 8 was capable of, and that the Booster Track course was 100,000,000% worth it, and a great addition to Mario Kart 8. And, yeah, easy 10 out of 10, maybe, you know, maybe an 11 out of 10. Let's call it there. Now, would you look at this? We've made it to the end of our ranking video for all of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I kind of knew when the Booster Track course got announced that I was going to do this eventually, because I love ranking stuff. And to be honest, Mario Kart 8 has been one of the more, you know, entertaining and inspiring turnarounds for a game that I've had, because I'll be honest, I said at the beginning of this video, I really didn't get on with Mario Kart 8. I thought it was a crucial disappointment to Wii when it first came out, and for me, the booster course absolutely saved this game, and it took something that was like near the bottom of my favorite Mario Kart games of all time to very much near the top. Does it hold a candle to Wii? It's hard for me to say. Mechanically, I just love Wii. But in terms of, you know, a lineup of tracks, Mario Kart 8 easily has the best. And, you know, I think they got to grips when they changed the meta with one of the later DLC patches. I think it made the racing a lot more enjoyable. And I think they started tailoring the maps to that. And also, you know, building the map around shortcuts and just enjoyable, more tighter lines. You know, I ended up loving Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and before I wouldn't even, like, think it was worth having a conversation with Mario Kart 8 versus Mario Kart Wii. I just thought Mario Kart Wii stormed it, but nowadays, like, I think there's a fair argument to be made for how good Mario Kart 8 is, just across the board. Like, yeah, it's just a really, really, really fun game, and it's been a really nice surprise, and I was not expecting a booster track course. You know, originally I was so excited for a Mario Kart sequel that I was a bit triggered that they were doing a DLC. I was like, really? We're going to, like, stretch out Mario Kart 8? But it's been worth it, 100%, and I think I stand by my map selections. I don't think it's going to change too much. I have played Mario Kart 8 an awful lot. I doubt, you know, even playing it twice as much, I'll have too much change in where my rankings are. But I'd be interested to see what you guys think of the list and your personal favourites and personal least favourites. But this has been Modest Major. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video and expect more content in the future. Maybe Mario Kart, maybe something different. But yeah, thanks guys. Peace out.